racism's good. You want to know why? You'll lose. Because if you have two
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the stream. Hope everything's good. I'm gonna have to check on the audio volume, so we'll see. But I think it should be pretty good.
walked in and said racism good against me, I'd have been like, great, this would be an easy win. So
it's gonna be a fun panel, hopefully.
So I guess if it's just us, here's my idea of what we'll do. We got the two topics. It's very loose. It should be very informal. So if we branch out from those topics, no problem. I thought maybe we'd do those two topics in the span of like 2 hours and then take audience questions, which could be in the form of anyone that's watching on you guys' channel or mine. I really don't care. And obviously questions that are in good faith. I don't want, Rob sounds like the guy. Who do they say I sound like? The guy from A Princess Bride. Inconceivable. They say I sound like that guy. I don't know.
Holy shit, you kind of do. Now that I've heard it, I can't unhear it.
Also,
especially once I get more hyped, yeah.
Also the Grand Nagus from Star Trek, Deep Space Nine.
I don't know about that.
So I think if everyone's ready to get started, we'll wait for Sprouticus to get back. I think what we'll do is just we'll just go around, introduce ourselves real quick, maybe what your political leanings are, just overall thoughts on the topic, and then I'll just we'll read off the first topic, and we'll just go from there. If Samantha shows up, this is her show, even though she's not here. She will run it. She could run it however she wants. I'm literally just a placeholder. I have zero interest in hosting panels or moderating. I'm too much of a big mouth. I don't like moderating. I don't like hosting. I'm just doing it out of necessity. So if she shows up, it's her show. She can do whatever she wants with it, as far as I'm concerned. So we'll wait for time. So I'll start it off. I'll just introduce myself a little and kind of my thoughts on the panel. So my name's Rob Noerr. You can find me at Rob Noerr at Twitch TV. I'm also Normal America with Rob Noerr on YouTube and a bunch of other platforms. I usually stream about 8 p.m. most weeknights. I consider myself a populist conservative. I think that both political parties in this country have kind of screwed over the average person on the left and the right, regardless of your skin color, your sexual orientation, and they seek to divide us to distract from issues of real importance.
Check 1 2.
When it comes to issues of whiteness, I don't really. I mean, I'm white. I'm objectively white. I'm not going to squirm out and be like, oh, I don't identify as white. That's garbage. I'm white. But I never really cared about it. I don't begrudge people of any ethnicity that want to take pride in their ethnicity and group together based on their ethnicity, because I do something similar. It's not based on my ethnicity. It's based kind of on lifestyle and geographic location. I feel that rural America has kind of got screwed over and that they don't really have a voice. And when I say rural America, I literally mean white people, black people, straight people, gay people, people that were born in this country, people that are immigrants to this country, etc. That's the group that I'm affiliated with. When I think about these issues that we'll talk about, like white issues, I generally tend to think of them more as rural issues than white specifically. But yeah, that's how I look at it.
All right, I think that's
I'll
better.
say something that's controversial, I guess, right off the
check
gate.
1 2. Check 1 2.
I don't care if 100 years from now there are people that look like me. I don't care at all. I would rather there be people that think like me. And so if there are people that share the same values as me and they look totally different and they're a total different ethnicity, I wouldn't care at all. So I couldn't tell you much about my background. Like I never took a DNA test. I know up to my great-grandparents. That's about it. I never really sought to look further than that. So, but that's about it. So we'll kick it over to my left, Sprouticus. You can go next if you like, man.
Okay. I am The Sprouticus. Cool. You can find me on Twitch and Twitter under the same tag, The Sprouticus. I'm a constitutionalist conservative. I come from Italian. I'm a third-generation immigrant, which means my great-grandparents came here from Italy. But further than that, I'm on the other side. I'm German. So that puts me on the wrong side of World War II twice. But yeah. I'm a constitutionalist conservative, and if you like my views after this, go give me a follow.
Whoever wants to go next, feel free.
I'll go. So my name is Biggs. You can find me on Twitch at Biggs8500. On Twitter, same thing, Biggs8500, and on YouTube as well. I'm a center right libertarian. I like to focus on real solutions to actual problems that we have, and I'm hoping that this discussion will be able to lead to some actual good ideas on how we can tackle these issues. I try to lean towards more freedom for the most part, but I do understand the practicality of having some social like leanings as far as like when it comes to like the economy and things like that, safety nets and whatnot. But overall, I would consider myself a centrist right leaning libertarian.
Go ahead. Or
I'll take
Tiberius,
it.
whoever.
Yeah, I'll take it. All right, so I am Tiberius D. I do geopolitical content. I have my own panel shows that I do called Mask Off, and then I also have my review content, which is basically, if you want to find out why Vader is a lame villain, come check out my stuff. As far as my politics, is that I'm kind of some kind of weird right winger, and that I usually just listen to the left, and I'm like, yep, I'm glad I'm not on that team. But then I listen to the right, and I go, you guys ain't doing it right. So I tend to piss off everybody in a nutshell. But as far as my takes on race, is that it's always been a little bit of a weird conversation for me out of the get-go, because I live in an area that is demographically 90% white, and functionality it's like 95, even 97, depending on what we're going by here. And so when people are like, hey, Tiberius, you're white, and I'm just sitting here, I'm like, well, yeah, it's like breathing oxygen. I have actually a more of an identity in being a fucking ginger than I do in being white, because it is that superfluous. It means nothing here. So it's definitely an interesting conversation going out into the rest of the country. But there is issues that hit my community in particular. There's issues that hit other communities. I respect the solidarity, but there's some of these conversations that are permeating out through the political discourse that I find incredibly unnerving, if not terrifying. And I don't think that people who are having these conversations understand the fire that they're playing with. I'll use that as my introduction. Thank you very much.
Okay, I guess it's my turn. Hi, I'm Wick. You can find me at twitch.tv/deathofcertainty. I'm mainly a leftist, though most other leftists would consider me
Everybody's a
center, if not
leftist.
right. I still haven't figured out why that is, since
I like
95%
Wick.
of
He's
the
pretty
time
cool.
I'm voting with them on the issues.
Pretty neat.
My whole shtick
Thanks everybody here that's
is I
watching. I
try to talk
appreciate
to
it.
people who have different opinions of me.
Hopefully,
I
I've got some good
try
things to
to
say.
realize that no matter how much data I have, no matter how much experience I have, that it's always possible that the other people I'm talking to know more than me on the subject that we are talking about. And I am always cautious of coming off as an ideologue, and I try not to do that. So I think it's good to have conversations with people outside of your political spectrum. That's the only way you're going to learn, right? But yeah, that's who I am, and I'm excited for the conversation tonight. I'm going to compare this to how it actually went on the all white everything panel that Prime Kai's hosted, since I was on that.
Heck yeah.
And it should be a different feel. We'll see.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll get started. So, like I said, this was Samantha Banana's show. Maybe she'll pop in. Maybe
I
not.
like how
That's
Rob's
okay.
trying to
But
just
we're gonna
like
go with
distance
the
himself from
topics
this. Like,
that
this
she
is
originally gave us.
Samantha's
And
thing,
it'll
not
be very
mine.
informal, so we'll see if it spreads out from there. So I'll just start with the first topic she had, and then people could speak. We don't really need to do opening statements. We'll make sure everyone gets kind of gets in here towards
Everybody
the
gets a
beginning. But other than
turn.
that, we'll just go with it. So the topic one that she picked out: have you or anyone you know been affected by the opioid crisis? Addiction, job security, death, overdose, hospitalization, etc. So, anyone in particular want to start?
I'll
I actually
start.
go ahead.
Because I had this conversation not too long ago, and I'm just gonna forewarn everyone here. This is an emotional topic for me. And so the answer to this question is yes. I've had one, possibly two of my cousins die from overdose within the year. And one of those deaths was last week, which was why I was gone off Twitch for about a week. And so with that being said, yes, and I think this is something plaguing the white community. I have a best friend who told me that I knew he was a drug addict, and he told me that he has done every drug, you name it, he's done it. And so I think this is something this is really plaguing the white community more than any other community. And I think that's something that
Is that better?
we really need to look at. We really need to address is the drug addiction problem that we currently have.
Hopefully that's better.
I want to back up on this. When it comes to me, is that I've lived in an area that's always been had to deal with hard substance, particularly methamphetamines. That's been a problem throughout most of the rural part of the Midwest for I don't know, the better part of the last 30 years that I can remember. But one of the things that's definitely changed is the rise of the opioid epidemic that has permeated my community and others. And I know a few people that have struggled with it. Most of them are not very personal, but I'm not going to name a name here. But I do have one, not immediate family member, but with a second tier family member that has been incarcerated for drug use and drug possession. And it's an addictive substance. It gets bad. Now, I don't know if this is strictly a white people issue or not. I don't really care about that. You know, I'm 100% on solidarity. And that if you think that this is a problem in your community, I want to help build bridges and help combat this to some degree, because this is not good for anybody's community in any way, shape, or form. It destroys people's lives. It hurts their own family members, everyone that it falls out with. So yeah, I definitely have seen this, and it is not something I would wish upon my worst enemies.
Big.
Yep, you there?
Yep.
Oh yeah. So I have a little bit of personal experience with taking prescription pills. When I was in high school, my dad was a pharmacist, and I've told him this, so I'm not too worried about sharing this. But when I came back from my first year of college, the summer after my first year of college, I was working at Taco Bell, and I would take some Vicodin and Percocets from my dad's cabinet because he had a bunch of extra medicine that he didn't really pay attention to. And it became one of these things where I would take, like 2 500 milligram Vicodins, 10 to 20 milligram Percocet, and go to work. So I can definitely see how this type of thing can affect people in a pretty profound way. Luckily for myself, I was able to not get too enthralled in the addiction side of it. I was able to kind of pull away from that and kind of control myself, but I can definitely see how that can really take a hold of people's lives. From a societal input, I don't know how much research you guys have looked into this, but most of the stuff that I found, there was kind of like 3 basic waves, where there was like the first wave was in the between like the 70s to the 90s, where it was the original heroin like uptick. From there, we had the over prescription of opiates to prescriptions. And the interesting thing about that was when I looked into the data, whites were actually much more likely to be prescribed opiates at that time than Hispanics or African Americans, which I think is kind of why this epidemic is now showing more statistical data in the white community than some of the other communities. And then we had, once that kind of became a problem, we had the crackdown of doctors having prescription drugs and a lot more stringency on the regulations for that. And then now, currently, we have another uptick in the heroin, because what basically was happening was the people were getting prescribed these prescriptions. Then eventually they got cut off from the prescriptions, or B, their insurance ran out, or something to that effect. And then they had to go to things like heroin and more street drugs. And that's where I think we're seeing kind of like the effects now. So I kind of have like a personal perspective and a sociological perspective, but I do think it's interesting that we have something like this that's really affecting the white community at a higher rate than other communities. And I think that that's largely in part due to the lax regulations on the healthcare system that we had in the 90s to 2010 or so.
Wick, you
Yeah.
want to go, and then I'll finish. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I have had family members that have been victims of the opioid epidemic, as well as friends who've been victims of the wider kind of term they use is deaths of despair, is the term that's kind of been thrown out a lot. We do have data on this. We do have numbers on this, and it's devastating rural communities, especially those people, members of the rural communities who don't have 4-year college degrees. More and more and more, they're succumbing to this. This has been an upward trend since the 90s. In fact, the life expectancy for for this segment of the population has gone down, which is crazy when you think about it. And not to be too alarmist about it, but these things are growing and it's hitting us harder and harder. Pennsylvania, where I live currently, is currently very hard hit by the opioid epidemic. You hear more and more about how communities, whole towns, are just being wiped off the face of the map, basically, due to the addiction to these substances, due to these deaths of despair. And it boggles my mind that we aren't talking about this more. It boggles my mind that we aren't having more discussions in spaces like Twitch about these things, because this is a huge issue and we have data on it, we have resources, and it's just the things we were trying to do to combat this are not working. It's getting worse. That's all I have to say.
I'll finish up. So to the question specifically, certainly I have been personally affected by the opioid crisis. So I consider myself, I wasn't clinically an alcoholic, but I would say I was an alcoholic. Like I drank a lot when I was in college. Um, and I had a very loose feeling about drugs. I really don't care what you do. I don't care, especially if it's not in my house. If I'm at your house and I don't like it, then I'll leave. Um, I had a lot of friends. I never got into opioids, I could be honest. I never even suffered an injury where I was prescribed any kind of painkiller medication. It wasn't because I was on some moral high horse. It was because I had so many friends that were on painkillers or were literally taking heroin or things like that. It just looks stupid to me. Like you go into a party and you watch someone on uppers or you watch someone drunk, or even if you're talking about like psychedelics and stuff, you could make a rational argument, at least I could. Hey, that could look fun in a certain circumstance. Not that I'm recommending any of that stuff. But with opioid, it didn't even look fun. It looked like people drooling on themselves with their eyes partially rolled back into their head. I had some friends peripherally that have died, that have overdosed. I certainly have friends, close friends, that have struggled mightily their entire life. I have friends on both sides of the law that are police and that have been arrested and spent considerable amount of times for dealing hard narcotics, including opioids. In my town, I've lived in rural Pennsylvania my whole life. It's just part and parcel to life. It just is. Like when you're old enough, you're 17, 18, and your friends in high school start drinking, you're inevitably going to be at a party and there's going to be people doing opioids there. There's going to be people doing prescription medications. There's going to be people doing heroin and things like that. It's just all over the little town that I grew up in. It's sad, but we could talk about the reasons that it might exist. I thought Biggs was interesting talking about the different waves. I know people that the two types of people I know that are hooked on opioids are one, the type that were prescribed at a very young age, some sort of pain pill, and they just kind of had an addiction that they struggle to get off of. And then two, people that got to the point where they were partying and they said, yeah, that's something I'd like to try, and the addicting properties of it kind of hooked them. Not everyone. I've known plenty of people that have done opioids that weren't hooked on them, that did it casually. But yeah, it's a big part of the community. As far as this being a white issue, again, I liken it more to a rural issue. If you're watching this and you're not from rural America, you might say, geez, what they're talking about sounds a lot like the crack epidemic, that we saw in the inner cities. And I agree. Like there are a lot of similarities, and there are a lot of people that take a jaded approach and say, well, rural America didn't speak up when this crack epidemic was happening. And that's true. And it is something that we should have had conversations with and tried to understand better to see what we could do as a country to kind of try to help people that are in this position. But nonetheless, I think that both of it, if you don't live through it, it's hard to kind of have an appreciation for what it is. There was a local in my town, there was a doctor that was arrested for selling pain prescriptions, opioids, in exchange for sex. This is a doctor that operated 15 years that was doing this. I mean, so I've seen all ends of this. from the law enforcement straight to the people that have overdosed and died and everything in between. It really is a tragedy. And it's a fine line between understanding the circumstances that make people more likely to make these choices, but also I think we need to reserve some ability to say people have personal responsibility. And, I'm sorry, there are a lot of people I know that are younger people that I've had conversations with saying, I'm going to this party. Oh, look, there's painkillers there. I'm thinking of trying it. And I'll be like, don't do it. I don't know what to tell you. It's not like drinking a beer. It's way more addictive to that. I'm not saying you're going to be addicted the rest of your life, but you got to have that personal choice. No matter how bad things get, that sort of escapism is not the answer. And I guess that's where I'll leave it for now. We'll see what direction people want to take.
Well, I
So
understand.
I'm gonna have to kind of push
Oh,
back.
go ahead.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to kind of push back on you a little bit there, Rob. I think that for some people, when they get addicted to drugs, when they get addicted to opioids, it's because it was prescribed. For the people where it was experimental, it may have been a choice when they first started taking opioids, or drugs of any kind that they got extremely addicted to. It may have started as a choice, but once you get addicted, I believe that transforms into a mental illness because it takes over your entire mind. It rearranges your entire priorities. It makes it to where you're not able to function normally in society. I've seen my best friend on drugs, and I've seen my best friend off drugs, and it's not the same person. And so I think that it really has to be looked at like a mental illness, and it needs to lose the stigma. People stop thinking about druggies as that's all they are. We need to humanize these people a little bit more and have some kind of understanding, because for a lot of these people, it wasn't their choice. This is what their doctor told them to take. And I think the doctors that are just prescribing opioids as like a one size fits all, instead of looking at every single thing before they go to opioids, where they know there's a high level of addiction, a high chance of this person becoming addicted to this drug, where that could be pushed into them being addicted without them trying to go to other drugs that may not have those kind of side effects.
Yeah, I think it's important to realize that how we deal with this on an individual basis is not the same as how we deal with this on a systemic basis. Now, there are systemic issues, and again, Spartacus, I 100% agree with you here. It's weird for me to say this, but it's true. That there are practices that we allow in the healthcare profession currently in the system. There are, and the way we deal with addicts through the system is failing. It's not working. So while Rob Noerr, individually, yes, if someone came up to me is like, "Hey, I want to do some opioids," I would say, "No, don't do it. Use your own free agency." I think that it is helpful to look at the systems because it is a systemic problem when it comes down to it. That's all I have to say.
No, I don't disagree. There are two ways to look at it, but one of the things I see, and so for those that don't know, my field is I work in home health care with people with developmental disabilities, autism, and things like that. And one of the mistakes I see is people have such a big heart in my field, the doctors, the people at the direct support level like me and elsewhere, that they want to take all personal agency against from the people that we talk. Nothing's ever anyone's fault. Oh, well, because of their circumstance, they could. That's not the right way to look at things. Certainly, you could say there is more likelihood for things to happen because of the surrounding situations, many of which maybe they have no control over. But we also have to leave room for personal agency as well. And one of the mistakes I see, and I've seen this with people that were addicted, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. When we've talked to them and said, look, here's how we're, there's a big problem here and we can help you and, we'll do what we need. And one of the most common things I've had, and I've had this conversation dozens of times, and what you'll hear more often than not, you might hear, I don't have a problem, things like that. But one of the things you hear is, it's not my fault. Doctor prescribed this to me, or, the economy's so shitty and I lost my job. And everybody says it's not my fault. It's not my fault. So people got to do something to help me, but I don't need to do anything because none of it's my fault. And that's not the right way to look at it. That doesn't mean that we don't look at the systemic factors. I mean, clearly, the same could be true if we're talking about, if we're taking white issues and putting them analogous to issues we might see in inner city Black communities. Like, we can't just be like, oh, well, the circumstances of things of the past and the economic circumstance of the city means that we look at that person that just committed strong arm robbery and we say, well, it's not their fault. They're a victim. And we have to do both simultaneously. We have to say, well, they're responsible for their actions, and we need to understand that they're more likely to commit those actions because, on average, systemic problems that could occur in that environment have led to those problems being more likely. So I definitely think that we see, if we'd rather focus more on the systemic issue, that's fine. I don't know how worthwhile the panel will be talking about individuals because each individual is different. But yeah, on the systemic level, I think that there's kind of a couple things going on at the same time. There are lack of economic opportunities and things like that occurring in many of these white communities. And again, it's not all white. I know that we're kind of colloquially saying that for these rural communities where we see the opioid epidemic, and it is majoritarily white. So there's economic opportunities and things like that. But something that maybe would be interesting to hear everyone's thoughts on, I think there's also a lack of a network for people caring. Like we talked about not having these conversations. It seems petty, it seems small, but if you're in any other group that's being disproportionately affected by something, it seems that there's a support group there for you. There are people in positions of power that are saying, yes, here's an issue in the inner city Black community. Here's issue with the LGBT community. Here's issue with women. Here's issue with, all sorts of people. But it seems all these problems are kind of being exacerbated in rural America and in the white community. Not only are those support networks not there,
it's Rob's
it
channel.
seems
I let
there's
him
a
talk
propensity to kind of blame them. Oh, it's not, you're still privileged. You still, it's all your fault. You were in this privileged position, and yet you still are suffering from opioid epidemic and things like that. And so I think those sort of things combined have led to a lot of despair and escapism, which is, I think, one reason, not the whole reason that we see.
So I wanted to say, I think the bigger systemic issue here is actually the healthcare system. When I was doing some research for this panel this week, I went on to the drugabuse.gov site and kind of found some very disturbing numbers here. And I'm just going to read just a couple numbers and maybe get like the panel's idea of like how this kind of relates to what we're talking about here. So one of the things I found very interesting was that 80% of people who use heroin for the first time first misuse prescription drugs. Like that's a huge, huge number there. Like 80% of anything you're talking about is like just ridiculous. It also says here that between 21 and 29% of patients prescribed opioids for chronic pain misuse them. So, I mean, I think that a lot of this really stems from the fact that during the time of whenever opiates really kicked off, I think it was like in the early 90s, up until about 2010, we just had this huge surge in the amount of prescriptions that were written. Not only from just the drug companies pushing these drugs, but also from, like Rob had mentioned, was, he knew a doctor that had been basically having sex for drugs. That's basically, there's a lot of that, like, drugs for money, sex for drugs, whatever. So I think that that's a huge, huge issue, to the point where there's actually the manufacturers of OxyContin are actually bankrupt now because there's so many lawsuits against them because of these wrongful deaths and things like that. So I just think that this, like, the whole healthcare system kind of like really dropped the ball on this and not realizing the amount of damage that these opioids and just the addiction has caused on just society in general, but especially these rural communities.
I want to jump in on two things. The first one is what kind of related to what Big says, in the regard that I do believe that the pharmaceutical industry and even the medical industry with doctors has dropped the ball on this one. However, I think, at least from the people that I've talked to and engaged with in the medical field, is that they've done a lot to try to regress that. Now, granted, there's a lot of layover effects from that, but at least from the people that I've engaged with, is that it's definitely far more of the case now that you are far less likely to be prescribed opioids, whether that's hydrocodone, whether that's OxyContin, whatever it is. That's going to be a treatment solution.
And that's why we're seeing the uptick in heroin.
People got nailed for it. People lost their careers. And some of that's sad. Some of that is warranted. I'm not going to get into that particular conversation. And there was another conversation more with what Rob was saying, which was I'm going to hold the privilege part. I'm going to wait for topic 2 on that one because I've got a lot to say about that. But regarding how we treat people, there's kind of a give and a take here, and I respect where Rob's going here because you do have a choice in whether you take that first top, right? And I kind of want to bring back the old this is your brain on drugs commercials because I haven't seen that for a while. It's like we dropped drugs back in the 90s and we picked up alcohol as like public enemy number one. It's like we can do both. But to wrap up what I'm saying with Rob is that, or more to Rob and Sprout's point, I largely agree with Sprout. We need to humanize people because people do make mistakes. Drugs is a highly addictive substance. I have had to deal with addiction. It was not drugs. It was something else. I won't get into that. But it warps your mind in just completely incredible ways. And you have to literally detox from it. You have to get away from it. You have to get off of that.
I'm glad this is only 5 people.
That
Because
has
if it
to
was
be
more than that,
humanized to a point.
Really tough.
And the other side of that is this: the only thing I will not side with when it comes to rehabilitation is fuck drug dealers. I'm still on the other side of that when you're not going to get me to rehabilitate drug users. So I'll wrap up with that.
So I wanna talk about something that you brought up, Tiberius, because it's very important that we have made changes in the healthcare system. I think we've tried our best to kind of deal with these knock-on effects, these mistakes we made in the past, and that's very true. I know that there's a lot of people who have opened up various centers in various cities to kind of help people get support they need. But one of the issues with that is where they're opening up these centers is the cities, which also have their issues, but um, the main epidemic, the center of the epidemic, and this is not just in the Appalachians, but from sea to shining sea, is in the rural areas, and they don't have the access to many of the same resources that people in an urban environment might, which is part of the problem. Another part of the thing is, even though we have made these changes, that this is on the rise. It's getting worse, and these changes. We will see. It will take some time to see the effects of them. I understand that, but I think that there's something going on here that I can't quite put my finger on. And the data I've read, no one can really point to any specific reason. But I think there's a more to it than simply just the healthcare system. There's more to it. When we talk about the deaths of despair, I think a lot of people, and this is a theory I have, this, you know, so take that for what it's worth, that a lot of this is coming based on the fact that, especially for people who don't have 4-year college degrees, they feel that they don't have a choice. They feel that they're getting trapped in these habits and things because that's all they have. And I think that needs to be addressed, or we're just going to keep seeing a rise in these instances.
I do want to. Sorry,
You're good.
not to pile on you, Tiberius, but I do want to push back on something you said a little bit closer to the end of that
I
statement.
want somebody to push
I
back
thought
on
that Blake was
me.
going to take care of it, but
Push back on me.
he didn't.
Sorry to kill you.
So when you're saying that you don't have any sympathy for drug dealers, I've got some sympathy for certain people and not for others. And I'll go deeper into that right now. But what I mean by that is that some drug dealers deal in order to feed their own addiction. It doesn't make what they're doing any less fucked up. But it's part of
Say
that
dumber
mental
stuff.
illness that I keep talking about, right? Though is
Yeah.
once you're addicted, it becomes a mental illness. It completely rearranges your brain, rearranges how you think, how you act, how you operate inside of society. But to the people that are sober and drug deal, I think are like trash. They're absolute trash people. If you're sober and drug deal,
They're
or
taking
if you
advantage. They're exploiting.
or if someone is a doctor decides not to try every other option before giving someone drugs that are extremely addictive and can lead them down this lifestyle,
Yep.
to not try every other option before that, I think is an absolute trash policy. I think it's just them trying to line their pockets instead of actually caring about the patient.
Yeah, that's what we've definitely seen. And I worked at a hospital before I had my current job, but previously I worked at a hospital, and while I was there, they actually instituted a pain clinic. And basically, the whole function of the pain clinic was to try to find those things that can alleviate the pain without having to resort to the narcotics and things like that. So basically, that was like the last option. So they'd have like rehabilitative therapy, maybe like through physical therapy, aquatic therapy, just like all kinds of different levels. And they would only do the prescription of the drugs at the the last possible option. But what we've seen currently is, like you guys said, we have seen a more stringent lockdown on the healthcare system. But now what's happened, and I kind of alluded to in my first comments, was about that third wave. So now what we're seeing is those people that got addicted to the prescription pain pills got cut off from those pills, and then now they have to resort to things like other synthetic opioids, like methadone, things like that, or they go through like like heroin, or even like I've seen some people use black tar opium. Who actually, I have another tangent story. Sometime I'll tell you. But I smoked black opium at black tar opium at a party one time in college that I didn't know I was doing. But yeah, so I think that because people are being cut off from their prescriptions because they were originally prescribed them, now they're resorting to things like street drugs, and I think that that's where we're seeing now this continued uptick, and that's what we really need to kind of focus on. Like we've kind of we've seen that the healthcare system's dropped the ball. Now we're seeing people being pushed towards the street drugs, and now we need to find a way to stop this. But I think it's ridiculous, and I don't know if you guys have seen this. I think it was a couple weeks ago that Seattle, I think it was Seattle or Portland, I don't remember which city it was, but they were literally handing out drugs of cocaine and like heroin and like all these drugs for free on the street. And I was just like, this just boggled my mind that they want to like push that type of
Do you
thing.
got a link to this? Because
Yeah, I'll
I
find
haven't
it.
heard of that. Can you just put it in, I don't know, one of Rob Moore's
Yeah, I'll find it.
ads? Thank you.
Yeah, and that's something that you see quite often, right? Where you see, in the name of, well, we can't stop people at this point from using the drug, so we'll try to make it safe. So you see, like, handing out needles, clean needle initiatives, heroin, and other things like that. Like that certainly occurs. One thing I'll say on this issue is, it makes me sort of jaded, and it's in my nature anyways, being someone that's kind of anti-authoritarian, to question people in positions of power anyways. And when I see what the medical community did with what I see as the overprescription, basically based on greed of these painkillers, what happens is they get caught with their hand in the cookie jar, and then it's like, oh, okay, yeah, sorry we did that for 20 years and all got filthy rich. Sorry about that. Now we'll have alternatives and things like that. And some of the alternatives in many ways don't help whatsoever. So I can tell you, by no means am I a drug expert in the lingo and things like that, but I can tell you this: I have friends that might as well still be doing heroin because they're on a prescribed drug called Suboxone, which they just basically take twice the approved amount and get a very similar high than they would have off the pain prescriptions or the heroin that they were doing anyways. I think that you could see this sort of thing, over prescription and stuff, apply to other areas. I don't want to get too off topic, but I think that there's been a criminal overprescription of medications for children for things like ADHD. I personally have loved ones that by the age of 10 years old were having some kind of, problems where they needed to see a psychiatrist. Within 2 meetings with the psychiatrist, they were put on some of the strongest sort of psychotropic medication that you could imagine. And I do kind of know a little about psychotropic medication because I'm responsible for learning about it and administering it in my job. And so it's shocking to me to see how common it is to give young children these strong psychotropic medications when their brain's still developing, and perhaps just through therapy and things like that, they would be able to grow out of any sort of issues that they have without, psychotropic medication. So
Yep.
what I see is, that there is, although I do leave room for personal responsibility, I do think that it's something that we need to address. I do see that there was this conflation of a readiness and a willingness for pharmaceutical companies and the doctors that they're kind of paying money to push these drugs out to
I
overprescribe
was
this
wrong. It was
medication. In
in
addition,
Vancouver,
with this
not
sort of
Seattle.
despair that
So
Wick's
it
talking
was in
about, where
Canada.
we see that there aren't a lot of economic prosperity. I mean, this sounds stupid, and I know people listening might think this sounds stupid. You want to know one of the reasons why people substance abuse where I live? Because they're bored, because there's nothing to do. And I mean, there is nothing to do. If you're a 16, 17, we don't even have a bowling alley anymore. The mall's all but shut down. You got to go an hour and 15 minutes if you live where I'm at to get to a reasonable mall. And when you're 16, 17, you know what that turns into? Where can I get a bag of weed? Where can I get my next case of beer? That's what you did. That's what everyone did. And some people, then they get a job or they get a loved one or something like that, where they stop that. Other people keep going. And they say, now I'm going to do, instead of just weed, maybe I'm going to do uppers. I'm going to start doing Adderall or something I was prescribed. And then maybe they got prescribed a pain pill, or their friend did. So they try that. And before you know it, that addiction spirals out of control, and, they can't get a handle on it. But yeah, I mean, it is a terrible confluence of circumstances. There's so many things that lead to it. And I do think that we need to, talk about this more, specifically how it's affecting places that we normally just call flyover country and say, well, that's not where the majority of people live, so we're not focused on that problem.
Well, you're exactly right. And this is why I think that I push kind of the importance of social infrastructure when I talk to people about this, because
That's not my stream,
Rob
damn
Noerr,
it.
you won't hear me say this a lot, but on this, you're exactly right.
I know I'm too base for
A
them.
lot of the reasons people start, especially young people start doing, is because there's nothing else to do. And if you have this social infrastructure in place, things like bowling alleys, things where people can hang out and have other options, it will reduce the rate of that. Won't eliminate it completely. Social infrastructure also has other benefits that we can talk about, but the opioid addiction is just one part of the problem here. It's one of the major parts. But when we talk about deaths of despair, it doesn't only go into that. It goes into addiction to other drugs. It goes into also suicide and suicide rates and things like that. And again, amongst the people without a 4-year degree who are middle aged, well, I'll give you an example, some data here. White non-Hispanic women back in the 90s, ages 30 and up, without a 4-year degree, they were 3 times more likely to die of a heart attack than they were of a drug addiction or suicide. Now, today, they're 30% more likely to kill themselves or die of a drug addiction than they are of a heart attack. And that's even with rises in obesity and other health problems as that. So it's a huge swing that we've seen over the last 3 decades,
Huge.
and it's a
It was
it's a it's a
huge.
problem. And
Huge
again, I,
swing.
I I hate to repeat myself, but I think it's worth repeating. We need to talk about it. We need to take it seriously. I was on Prime Kai's panel. I tried to bring this discussion in the main topic, but he guided it off it for other issues. But
He wasn't having it.
I
He didn't want to
wanted
talk about white issues. He didn't want to talk about them. He didn't care. He's like,
I'm
fuck
not-
your
I
white
really wanted-
issues. I
I'm
want to
not
talk about
going there.
whiteness.
We'll
Okay.
talk about that in the second topic.
Okay.
I think,
Yeah.
Noerr.
So
okay.
I mean,
I got
so
two
with-
replies that I want to tag out real quick, if you guys don't mind. The first one's to you, Sprout, and it's I don't think your drug dealer comment is off board. I think you have a point here. There are people that absolutely get addicted to drugs. They want to, and they feed their addiction by selling more. I don't have data for this, but in my personal experience, most of the people that that are drug dealers are those who aren't addicted to the substance. They're selling it because it's a fucking lucrative cash cow. If someone has data for that, we can definitely dig into that. I'm sorry that I don't. The second part to Rob is that the biggest thing that me and Rob always disagree on is that he's more of a
Looking
right-wing
up my shots.
populist. I'm
Forget
more
that
of
I can't, like,
right-wing elitist.
Turn off my
And that
fucking
is,
Discord to
even the
other
elites
things.
make mistakes. Doctors are going to make mistakes. Bad things can happen, right? Now, is Big Pharma a problem? Yeah, we've bitched about that many, many times. If we need to do it again, I can give it 5 minutes. But, I mean, the problem was twofold. Number one, yeah, Big Pharma. Number two was that we, the people, might have fucked this one up a little bit ourselves, because it's so easy to be like, hey, you got a pill for that? What's the easiest thing here?
Yep.
And so when it comes to people and having to deal with their problems, we haven't been teaching people coping skills. We don't educate our kids in a way that understands that boys will be boys. It's a bad thing. Now it's Ritalin and whatnot. So on levels, I definitely agree with Rob, but on other levels, I got to push back and be like, look, I don't think the doctors completely fucked the ball here. Nearly as much as what happened was that we took the
The
easy road,
self-fulfilling prophecy.
and that was a mistake. And now we've realized that was a mistake, and we got to walk it back.
Yeah, it's definitely.
I think here's like another part of the
Fucking
problem,
Zach.
because I
Goddamn
had a
Zach.
panel discussion about this prior. I think another part of the problem is that police officers, especially in like overly rural areas where everybody knows everybody, oftentimes when someone's caught underage drinking, when someone's caught smoking weed, they won't necessarily be taken in, but they will be just dropped off at their parents' house, and the parents are expected to deal with what happened. At the same time, I don't think
That's not the case
people
anymore.
who do this kind of stuff should be taken in. I think that at the exact same time that
I think you're living in the past with that, Zach.
my last thought. So at the exact same time, my last thought was, it's not the past. Trust me, it's not the past. I grew up in an overly rural area. They would just be dropped off at their parents' house because the cop knew who the parents were. But at the same time, I think that if you're on drugs, and you're caught being on drugs, I think it should be mandatory rehab, whether you want it or not, because that can at least at the least that's going to do is give you time to get over the I can't think of what it's called, but the withdrawals for the drug, and think about what happened with a sober mind. That's the least that can do as a mandatory rehab. So like at the same time, I don't think these people should be going to jail. I think they should be going to get help. And jail has shown to not be help. Jail has shown that these people can still get drugs in jail. They can continue continued their addictions in jail, and when they get back, the problem was never really fixed. I think the drug problem is something that really needs to be taken on from a rehab perspective rather than the jail perspective.
So I just have a clarifying question for you, Spartacus, if I may. Would you ascribe
Oh, I
that
gotta
for the
stop calling
first
him Zach
offense, like
and
the first
just
time you get picked
Spartacus.
up for being
I always
drunk and
forget
disorderly
that.
in public, or the first time you get picked up for having popped some pills? Would that immediately, right away, go to rehab, mandatory rehab, or would this be something you'd more prescribe for repeat offenders?
I mean, definitely for repeat offenders. I think there's more of a conversation that we're gonna need to have for first times. But definitely for repeat offenders, if you keep finding this person who keeps being drunk and disorderly, or you keep picking up this person who's high, not even just off marijuana, but just off of like any other drug. I don't think marijuana is that big of a deal.
Of
But
course
if
not.
you start talking about like opiates and you keep picking up this person who's high on opiates, then there's definitely something that needs to happen, and I don't think it's jail time. I think it's mandatory rehab.
Yeah, so I think you guys, Spartacus and Tiberius hit the nail on the head with the whole thing where it's like everything has a pill. I mean, we look at like just look at the freaking television commercial. It's like every other commercial is like some like, hey, do you have this problem? Here's a pill for this. Do you have this problem? Here's a pill for that. It's like we have this whole mentality as a society that like, hey, if I have a problem, I can fix it with this pill. And instead of like talking to somebody like a psychiatrist or a therapist or things like that, like everybody just wants to take a pill. They want the simple out. I think that's part of the whole thing that Rob was saying in the beginning with the whole like personal responsibility. I think a lot of it too, again with the pharmaceutical issue and the healthcare system, but like we do need to take some responsibility, and the whole society is like pushing people to take these like easy outs of the pills, and I think that's ridiculous. But I want to hear what Wick has to say.
Yeah, I'm not with you guys on this. This is where we part ways, I think,
Okay.
because while what you're saying isn't necessarily wrong, it's simply like okay, but that's not a real fixable problem, and that's not, I think, where we should invest our resources into trying to tackle this problem. Yes, I think that over medication is an issue in America right today. However, I think that is a separate issue. And I don't think it has as big of an impact as is being suggested here. I think where the major impact lies is the economic conditions. I know I sound like such a lefty right now, but the economic conditions that these people are finding themselves in, and they call it deaths of despair for a reason, because they despair. They have no where to go, and so it's not just, oh, is there a drug for that? It's there's nothing for this. I might as well drink myself to death. I might as well just stop and not care. And I think it's to be more clear, it's not helpful to talk about it as oh a more of a culture issue, because that's much harder to fix than some of the systemic issues
But
we
what's
look at.
causing them to need that out?
They don't have a job, they don't have prospects, they don't have money,
So is
they
that
have
would that
nothing.
still be do you think that's like still like down to personal responsibility, or you think that's like the society
I
telling that this
Yeah,
is
I
their way
mean,
out? I still think there's a lot more. I think you're disregarding the mental influence of the propaganda and the constant bombardment of drug commercials and things like that. Like I kind of feel like you're like hand waving that away a little bit.
well, if that was the case, we'd see this being an across the board thing. But I don't think we are. We're seeing this specifically in certain communities. And what these communities have in common is the economic conditions, because everyone across the board, even in suburbia, is bombarded with this propaganda, as you call it. But we don't see the same results there. So obviously, that's not the variable that's causing this. It may be contributing to it. I wouldn't disagree with that. But when we look at what is happening, we have to look at why, like what's the most important variable here. And I think we can
So
kind of put our finger on this, and that's the that we do not have jobs for people without college degrees. They're going away. They're being replaced, they're being offshored. The jobs that do exist pay piss poor. They don't have prospects, they don't see themselves going anywhere, and their problems, whenever they try to voice them, are being ignored. And that's a big issue for me.
I don't
I want to.
disagree. I think it's a litany. Yeah, I'll kick to you real quick, Tiberius. I think there's a litany of reasons. I think that both of you are right. Both of these are things that need to be tackled. Certainly, economic prospects in rural America have dwindled considerably over the past 50 years. and not just that, entertainment prospects, cultural prospects, etc., which make it more likely that if you take a medication that was overprescribed, that you end up getting addicted to it. Certainly, physical addiction is real, and there are many, many people that prescribed medication and used it exactly as prescribed, but still found themselves addicted. But I think that you'll see that it's more likely that you develop a dependence on that if a lot of the economic factors you're talking about, Wick, exist. So just because you shattered your collarbone when you were 16 and you were putting some sort of opioid, if your economic prospects were good and you're going off to college and you have a girlfriend and you have a lot of good like family support and a lot of good friendships and personal relationships, probably despite the fact that you were prescribed that medication, you're less likely to get addicted to it than maybe the person that has the exact same injury, prescribed the exact same medication, but doesn't have those things. They're working some 9 to 5 for minimum wage. But that doesn't mean that we cast shade on the first person if they do get addicted. There are many ways to get to this. So, there is the economic factor that we need to take into account. There's the factor we'll talk about in the second portion of this, which is listening to people and not ignoring them because they don't belong to groups that you consider oppressed normally. But I think we do have to be honest about, we have to go after the sort of mentality and the medical profession if they are overprescribing things. Like this is why is there a difference? We could see poor economic prospects in the inner city. Why aren't opioid addictions as bad in the inner city as in rural America?
Well, we talked about that earlier. We had the social infrastructure there. That's where the rehabilitation centers are. That's where the government has put their funds.
I mean that's partially true, but I think that there's two other bigger reasons.
A little inside baseball.
The first is because there's more available other addictive drugs like crack, and things
crack
like
is
that.
whack.
And the second is I think a lot of opioid abuse comes from abuse of prescription medications, and there might be a series of other problems in the inner city that make you less likely to be able to get a prescription medication. And so you start on those street drugs as opposed to starting on the prescription, and that lends you down a path of addiction of different substances. And so I definitely think, given that because we're focused just in this conversation on the opioid crisis, then we have to say that the distinct difference is because it's coming so much from the medical profession. Now, whether it be through corruption, greed, incompetence, or just not realizing how people would abuse that, I think that we need to start to hold people in that profession that are being unethical accountable. And those that are trying to engage ethically, we need to understand that they know that they have to give these medications out as a last resort.
We know that they know.
So if we attack this culturally through the medical profession and economically, I think that that's the best chance that we have of dealing with this. But I mean, if you're looking for an easy solution, there isn't one. I mean, this is a problem. It's going to take decades. If you don't believe me, go talk to someone who's addicted to heroin. Talk to someone who's addicted to opioids. It's not easy, and I mean, there's all kinds of stuff I could give you advice personally. What they have to accept personal accountability. They're probably going to have to completely change
Barry's
their network
making a
friends,
visit
because it's very difficult to change your behaviors if you're hanging out with the same people. Because those people at one level or another probably allowed those behaviors to occur, or they trigger memories of those behaviors. I know many people that did well 2-3 months of sobriety, and then they're like, I'm just going to go hang out with my old friends. All it took was watching them crushing up one pill, and that's it. All that good work is done. So, I mean, there's a lot of different angles to look at it, but I think talking about it, and if you're listening and you're struggling with this, be open about it. Talk to loved ones. It doesn't make you a piece of garbage. Yes, you need to take personal responsibility. You do, but there are a lot of factors that went into it, and you need to be able to talk to people. It's not something that you should just be shamed about. Probably a lot of people
Barry's
that we consider
here, boys,
famous or well-to-do people have these sorts of problems that you just never hear about. So, don't be ashamed of it. Getting help's the most important thing.
That last part,
I think there's an important distinction that we're all failing to say. I think we all have it in the back of our minds, but we're just failing to actually state it. Is that there's a difference between drug addiction and drug dependency. If you have a long-term illness that is dependent on a certain type of drug, that's not necessarily an addiction because you're medically dependent on that drug.
Whereas an addiction would be something where you're no
I don't think it has
longer
anything
you're
to
no
do with anything
longer
we're
medically
talking about.
dependent, or you were never medically dependent for that specific drug, and you continue to take it, and it's affecting your life to where you are mentally dependent on that drug. There's a huge difference between physical dependence and mental dependence when it comes to
I don't know what
opioids.
he's talking about.
And so I think that's something we all had in
I
the back
always
of our
stroke my
heads.
beard,
It's
and I'm
just something
sad
we
because I shaved
failed
it down the other
to
day,
mention.
and I wish I had
At the
more.
same time, I think that the
What the
legalization
fuck is
of
Zach
weed
even talking about?
federally would help curb the opioid epidemic. I think that just the legalization of weed would assist in that because
I
I
agree
think
with
that
that.
weed medically can take care of a lot of problems
No, I
where
do agree with that, but
opioids
I didn't know what he was
don't
talking
take
about
care
before.
of.
Now he's talking about
I
this is
mean,
fine.
take care of them, but they have all these different side effects. We don't have these same side effects
That's
that
a good
opioids
point
do.
for sure.
So I think that the
You have
legalization of weed could really assist, especially with doctors, in the reduction of giving people opioids just as a one size fits all. And here's your opioids. Hope your pain
I do
goes
think
away.
I
just real quick, if I may, do we have actual data on this? Because we've had states that have decriminalized at least marijuana for quite a while now. Um,
According to NIH.gov, it shows a reduction in rates of opioid overdose and opioid related
yep.
hospitalizations, among other outcomes
awesome.
in states with medical marijuana laws.
Yep,
Then great, awesome, yeah,
we
cool.
definitely see a correlation between medical marijuana or recreational marijuana for places for things, especially like like you said, like taking it for like there's things that cancer patients take THC for like appetite. Same thing with like PTSD, things like that. Like there's a lot of different applications that cannabis can have that can kind of alleviate some of the need for the opiates. I think that's definitely a good step in the right direction. I'm all for like a more um, uh, less side effects and more positive outcomes. And I think that that's definitely something we can look forward to, hopefully in the future, with more states kind of coming on board with that.
I've got two things I want to add here. I'm trying to find the data for this because I heard about this not too terribly long ago, and it's more of a unfortunately it's a little bit of a pushback on Wick. Is
weed.
that the socioeconomic conditions aren't 100% here. It definitely has a part to play, but one of the groups that I remember reading on that's been hit extremely hard by the opioid epidemic is actually
I gotta
suburban
go
women.
to the restroom.
That
I'll be
it's hitting
back. I'm gonna
very
leave
middle-class
Barry here for a minute.
neighborhoods,
I'll be back.
in a way that a lot of people didn't expect.
I'm
And
sure that's true. But there was a book recently published that has a lot more data that I could just list here. It's called Deaths of Despair. It was published in 2020. Deaths of Despair and the Future of Capitalism. And while I'm 100% with you that there are other factors here, they found that this is the area that's being hit the hardest. Now, yes, I'm sure you're right that we've seen an uptick across the board on this, but by and large, at least according to the data that was presented in the book, it's happening to people without 4-year degrees, people who are white, people who live in rural communities, and people who are middle aged.
Yeah, there's definitely some levels where I can get on board with that. I might be a little skeptical as far as your sources, but we'll talk about that at another date.
That's fine.
Yeah, like if I remember right, like it was within the last 10 years, like opioids among suburban women had gone up like 300%. I'm trying to find the damn source for that. I can't find that. I apologize. The other point here was that I wanted to tag in real quick was the friend network that Rob talked about. Because oh my God, he's absolutely right on this. That is one of the biggest things that I have noticed that people who are relapsing into drugs have the problem with is that they go to jail, they go to rehab, what have you. They come out, they're actually clean, they're relatively sober for the most part, but then they just go right back to the friends that they had, and those friends just pull them into the issue that they were right back or that they were originally in. You basically have to cut the cord, and you have to realize that hey, the friends, the colleagues, whoever it is in my life that I have been around with are bad for me. They're getting me into these situations. And that's really hard for people because humans are social animals. And I have this really powerful modifier. It's called I hate people, but most people don't. And so for me, cutting the cord's easy, but for most people, it's not.
Well, I kind of want to steel man you on that. My best friend who told me that he was he tried every drug
Yeah,
and he did every drug, you name it, he's done it.
I had to pee like a racehorse,
He's
as a matter of
off.
fact.
He's sober.
Mhm.
Which I'm extremely proud of him for. But when he was a drug addict, my church kicked him out. My church didn't want anything to do with him. And a lot of our friends just said, I'm not going to be friends with you anymore, didn't want anything to do with him. I was his last friend that wasn't using drugs.
I feel bad.
And so it
Zach
took
was his last
that for
friend.
him to actually get off drugs. He had overdosed 2 or 3 times by that point, but it was the last overdose that got him thinking, like, I need to get off this, otherwise it's going to kill me. And he excommunicated all of his friends except for me. But he's told me personally that if I was not his friend, he doesn't think he would ever be able to get off drugs because he would have had nobody to turn to. This isn't to pipe up me. This isn't to say, oh, I'm such a good friend, etc. and so on. But this is to show that they do need people. They
All
need people
hail
to be there
Saint
for them no matter
Sproticus.
what. And that's what they need. And I think it's disgusting that churches are turning people away. I'm a Christian. I think churches are a hospital for the sick, not a museum of the good. And so I think it's disgusting that churches are turning people away when they actually want to be
Would you
there.
make me, Gooby?
But
Okay.
they need people, and if they don't
Oh,
have
thank you.
people, the likelihood of them getting off drugs is slim to
It's
none
spicy,
because
oh
they're going to be
no.
going to a place where they
Go
have no
upstairs and go to bed,
support.
babe.
They have no moral
Past your
support, no
bedtime.
nothing. Even if something's going on in their
Go.
life, they have nobody to turn to
No,
because
go.
they just got rid of all of their friends.
My daughter's being
So
like
that
crazy.
in and of itself is going to decrease, if not eliminate, the amount of people that get off drugs because they have no one to turn to once they get off.
I 100% am with you on that, and it goes back to the conversation that we had kind of at the start of this about the stigma, and it's just one of those weird things that's very unfortunate. But like the people that you really need to help you get through that are the people that tend to be the most stigmatic when it comes to this. The people that are like, "Oh, you touch drugs, how dare you?" But that's the people that you kind of need to keep you away from people who would do that. And it's just unfortunate that it's either we're kind of in this polarized society where we're either like drugs are okay and I'm going to help you, or drugs are not okay and I'm not even going to deal with you. And we that's part of that humanization factor that that was brought up earlier that I 100% am with, is that people need to understand that, you know, and this is an old timer thing that I've definitely noticed. People that are Gen X and particularly boomers, is that they're just like, you know, no drugs at all. And I 100% get that, but they have to realize that, you know, my generation was kind of raised with the idea drugs were okay, you know, peer pressure, all that shit. And so like we need people who are a little bit more stigmatic to actually kind of bring the roost home and actually help them out through that. And that's been something that's not been working very well. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's the tragedy of it, isn't it? The people that these the addicts and those who are dependent and in these situations need the most, their peer groups,
Yeah, we got the
their
topics
church
ahead of
groups,
time.
and
Basically, it
things
was
like that.
just
They abandon them
do you or
when they
anybody you
fall into
know
these things.
have
And I've seen it.
been
I'm
affected by
not
the
religious
opioid
now, but I grew
crisis?
up religious, and I was in the
And the other
the
topics
church.
about
And yeah, I was told
like being
specifically, you do
judged
not
based on
hang
being
around
white
with
and your
those
political
types of
views and
people,
stuff.
drug addicts, degenerates and things like that. And that I was to ostracize them, that I was not to have anything to do with them, because if I did, and my parents had this fear for me, it wasn't like they were trying to be dehumanizing to them, but they just wanted, they were selfishly in a way wanting me to not go down that road. And they thought that if I
Take
was
me
their friend, that I would be more
home,
likely to go
country
down that road. They didn't
road,
trust me to be
to
able
the
to lead him back or
place
lead other people
I
back. They worried that
belong.
I would be weak
West
and fall prey to
Virginia,
their lifestyle.
Mountain
And I get it and I
Mama,
understand it, but it's doing a lot of harm.
take me
So again,
home,
100% agree with the panel here
country
that
road.
we stigmatize this,
Oh my
and we need a
God,
cultural
I hate
shift
you guys.
to
I hate
reach
you
out
all. I
instead
hate
of
all of
pushing away.
you.
And I'll just say this real quick.
I hate you
to
all.
kind of present
But I
the
love
other
you all.
side of this,
You're
because
amazing.
the other side of this is true. I don't take back anything I've said. I think everything everyone's saying here is good. Sometimes it's tough though. You know, I've been there. I've seen it. I've seen a
Oh yeah,
grandparent
Care
with
Bear.
a grandson struggling with heroin
Gabby.
addiction that had over
Bring Barry
$40,000
back.
of stuff stolen from their home.
Bring Barry. They want
Over and
Barry.
over, giving everything
They
had
demand
for this
Barry.
person, and
They
this
demand
person just
Barry.
screws them over again and again and again and
Barry
again
is back.
and again, and it devastated them. and they died.
You ask,
that
we
grandparent
shall
died years before
provide.
they probably would have, because of the mental anguish.
Hey, I love
of
you,
watching,
Operation Madman.
giving
Thank
everything
you
they
for
had
hanging
to
out
help
here. I
someone, and
appreciate
it just
it.
wasn't working. You know,
How's it been going?
look, it sounds like it's, you don't have to be a
I got the
superhero,
Care Bear.
right?
The
Like,
Care Bear
maybe it's not for
stare.
you. Maybe
Fucking Care
maybe
Bear
you
stare,
don't have the strength.
motherfucker.
Maybe you yourself suffered from addiction, and
Care
you're not going to be the
Bear
best person. Maybe if you suffer from
stare.
addiction, you literally are the best person to help someone. But maybe you're not in that
Sorry.
place. Maybe dealing with someone else that's suffering from addiction brings you back. You have
Oh,
to
you
take
are
care
all
of yourself
amazing. Thank
first.
you guys all so
And
much
if
for
it gets
hanging
to the
out. I
point
appreciate it
where
so
you're
much.
trying to help someone through this,
You're
and it's
amazing.
harming your life in a significant way, you have to understand that there
All
are
of you.
people
Super
that are
amazing.
in positions better to help out. If it's a close loved one of you, you know, or a close friend, you know,
Lighting
I'm
shit
gonna
on
tell you
fire
straight
right
up,
now?
there have
Awesome.
been friends that I watched suffer through heroin.
You just
that
want
I
to
would
write?
wash
Hey,
my
so
hands
what are
of.
you like? Are you
I just have
Antifa
to
or
say, I
something?
can't do anything more for you.
You just
I
want to
can't.
write like Antifa, fucking lighting
I'm
fucking fireworks at the fucking
jeopardizing
federal
my
building
loved
and
ones
shit?
now.
Do
You know,
it.
there are
Yeah, I
people
get
that
it.
I used, and so it's a difficult
I love it.
line. You know, and the other thing I want to say real quick, someone did mention, like, it does sound good. Oh, reach out to that support network you have. What if you don't have that support network? And that's true. Not every. If you want to talk about privilege, you want to know why I'm privileged? Because I had family and loved ones that gave a shit about me. That's
Hell
the
yeah.
biggest privilege.
That's a
The heck
privilege.
with gender, skin color, sexual
Yep,
orientation, all
that's
that
it.
stuff's far secondary. I had a family that wasn't wealthy. They were a poor
100%.
family. They busted their ass for me. My wife's family, they bust their ass for me. I have friends and neighbors that would do anything for me. That's the biggest privilege that I have. But you might not have that. And all I can tell you is this: the strongest person in your world is you. And
Oh my
even if
God,
you
what the
don't
fuck?
have those connections, you have the ability to overcome that. And there are people out there for you, even if you don't think. It might
I
not
hate
be someone
Samantha
in your
now.
personal
Fuck
life,
Samantha.
but there are addiction hotlines, there are doctors, there are people that you might develop a friendship just with someone
Hell
online.
yeah.
But
Get
there
that
are
grift
people out there
going.
that care
Gotta
about
make
you.
that money.
And, you know, my mantra in life is this: you're not
Money,
better than
money,
anyone, and no
money.
one's better than you. I assure you, as bad as you think it is, and as ashamed as you are of yourself, of the things you've done, there are many, many people
Must
that have
be.
done worse. You know, so don't feel like you don't deserve help, or that there's no one out there for you, even if you don't have family because they passed away, or you
Oh,
never knew
thank
them, or
you.
something like that.
Barry.
There's help to be.
What, this
gotten.
is for
So
Barry?
It's tough. You know, I know I'm saying seemingly
Not for
contradictory
Barry. Barry
things
doesn't
here.
get
On one hand,
anything.
sometimes you have to wash your hands.
Oh, I
But
have
on
to
the other
serve
hand, there's
Barry his
always people
food.
there for you, and both
Barry,
of those
here's
things
your
are true.
food.
It's
He
you gotta know where you're at personally.
Oh, he
that's
needs
So
a
I want to
spoon.
back
Okay.
you up
Just real quick.
100% on that.
Okay, here.
I want to back you up absolutely
Here,
100%
here we go.
on
Barry, here you go.
that. Because
nom,
I
nom,
can
Barry.
tell you, I mean, this
Oh,
this
Barry,
is
here,
going a
drink
little
your
bit
wine,
off topic,
Barry.
but I can
Drink your
tell you,
wine.
I've dealt with
Okay, there
depression,
you go. Okay. Barry's
and
good, thank
I
you.
just hated it, and I pretended like I didn't have depression. I learned really easily how to fake emotions. But
Gabby,
when
here's another thing.
I faked emotions, people who actually
The
also
lid.
had depression came to me asking for help. And I
Yeah, she
tried to
is
give it to them
definitely
the best
cutie
I
pie.
could, because
That's
they just
my
saw me as
youngest,
a
Gabby.
happy-go-lucky guy. But I was dealing with something at that time, and it only brought my depression down more, because I was trying to fix someone else's problems before I was ever willing to fix mine. And so if you're, like Rob said, if you're having problems, or you were drug addicted, maybe you're not the best person, but maybe you are the best person. Right now, I can handle someone
I'm the
who
best person.
has depression. I can
I
talk to them.
love
I can talk them
people.
through it. I can tell you, I know
a people
exactly
person,
how
really.
you feel, and I was there before. Let me tell you how I got out, and let me help you out of this pit. And so that's just kind of how it works. Sometimes you're not the best guy to talk to, and sometimes you are the best guy to talk to. And it really just depends on where you're at in life, and where that person's at in life, and whether or not that clicks or not. I mean, you may be the best person for one drug addict to talk to you, but the worst person for another drug addict to talk to. Like I said, the two have to clash. The two have to meet, right? Where you are in life and where they are in life have to meet for you to be the person to help them get out of a drug addiction, or the person to help you get out of drug addiction. Those two have to meet, and that's just the chemistry you can't make up, you can't fake. It's something that's going to happen naturally, and if you're not that person, don't feel bad. if that person turns you away, it just means you weren't that person. You didn't have the necessary skills. But don't feel bad just because that person turned you away. There's somebody else that is just as willing to help you out and where you are. And like Rob said, you may not even know them. You may find them in a Narcotics Anonymous meeting where this person goes there just to help out people who are new to Narcotics Anonymous, and they're there to help out the newbies and to walk them through how they got out. There's always someone there, and don't feel helpless just because if you feel like if you stop doing drugs, you're gonna lose all your friends. You may lose all your friends, but in order to find the right friends, sometimes you need to get rid of the wrong friends.
Yeah, and
Let's
I
go
just
to
want
Wick
to.
real quick, and then we'll just do closing thoughts after Wick goes.
I
You can have
always
a
looks
closing thought
confused.
too, and we'll move on to the next. So go ahead, Wick.
He's always
Sure.
like, "What the fuck are these people
Just
talking
to be
about?
real
Like, what the
clear,
fuck?"
I'm not asking anyone to sacrifice themselves for the sake of another. If you've done all you can, then you've done all you can. You know what I mean? What I see, however, is instead
Yeah,
of doing all
sometimes when
they
people
can,
talk,
people
I'm
do
not sure what they're
nothing or the
saying.
opposite of nothing. And now there's certain people in my life that I've had to cut off because of their negative behaviors and things like that. But if they had changed their behavior, I would have welcomed them back in with open arms. If they had changed their situation, then I would be there for what I can. There's
The
a lot
next
of
topic should
resources,
be
and I won't
interesting.
go too much into it because Rob Noerr
I'm not
and
sure what
Spartacus both went through it
exactly.
pretty beautifully. I have nothing to disagree with. Um, I would just say that while you can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink. But it's important to lead them there anyway, even if you suspect they won't drink enough. My closing thoughts on this, I guess, since it's my turn, is that the opioid crisis is a symptom. It's part of a larger epidemic we're seeing across this country, from sea to shining sea, mostly in rural areas, but not exclusively, of deaths of despair. People who cannot get ahead, people who feel they aren't being listened to, people who feel they don't have a voice and they don't have a choice, and all they're dying. It's happening in larger and larger numbers, and it has been for decades. It's the life expectancy has gone down. And not just because of COVID. This was happening before COVID. COVID made it worse. And we see this again and again, and it boggles my mind that we're pretending it's not happening, that we're pretending that it's all okay, that the way you hear some people's rhetoric, and especially in online spaces, is that, oh, well, they have privilege, it's their fault, don't worry about it, they should just pull themselves up by the bootstraps, etc., etc. It's their
Rip,
fault,
Lunar got
basically.
timed out. Oh
And
no,
it
Lunar, I'm
boggles my mind that
sorry.
people who
What
would never say
happened?
this about any other
What
situation or
happened,
any other
Lunar?
group are so easily able to say it for this one. And
Yeah, there was some
it's
Stone Temple
disheartening.
Pilots on there, but
And
I
that's
turned
all
it
I have to
down.
say.
I can go next if you want, and we'll just go around the horn. Well said. I mean, when it comes to I think the biggest issue, there are so many angles to this. I think that if I'm trying to talk to the audience here and you're not familiar with this problem, maybe you don't live in rural America, it is a huge problem. And if you live in rural America, it's probably affected you. You probably, either you yourself or a loved one or a close friend has gone through opioid addiction in some way. And we could point the finger at many places, whether it be the medical professional, the doctors, the pharmaceutical companies, individuals.
Hey, it's not a
economic
competition,
situations,
computer,
cultural
okay?
situations,
It's not a
etc.
fucking competition.
But I think, and those conversations are
We're
all
all
worthwhile, and
here
I thought we
for
had
the
a pretty
love
good
of the game,
conversation.
okay?
But what
I love
we
all of
need
you.
is the ability to talk about
You're
it.
all
And that's
amazing.
where I really agree with Wick.
Every
there
single
again
one
is
of you.
It
Thanks for
seems
stopping
like
in.
so often what happens is we as a society, as our institutions, right? The voices that really have power, they tend to prefer certain problems or categorize certain problems as more important than other problems. And so oftentimes, I mean, I didn't watch, we'll talk maybe more about what the other whiteness panel was about and stuff like that. I'm not trying to single anyone out or anything like that, but I did
No, it's
see
never a
the
competition,
conversation
man.
before that.
I do
panel
this for
took
the
place,
love of the
where
game.
there
I
were
don't care how
people
many
that were
viewers I
literally
have
saying,
or don't
we don't
have.
even know if we're comfortable
I do
with
it for
white
all of
issues
you.
being discussed.
And I do it, I
What
do it
could
for
happen?
Barry.
And
Barry's my
when
boy.
you see the callousness of a statement like that, there was nothing nefarious in this first topic. This is a
Thanks,
real
Lunar.
problem.
I appreciate it.
It doesn't just affect white people, by the way. It's disproportionately affecting white people, disproportionately affecting rural America. And
I'm
it's certainly a
excited. Yeah,
problem
hell
that
yeah, Barry.
needs to be talked about. And I think that, there are a lot of people that are like, if it doesn't align with the tribal view I have, I don't really want to talk about those problems. Or there are people saying, I'm afraid to talk about those problems because I think that it'll be spun as somehow nefarious or something like that. And
I
that's
think I'm
not
getting
the
a
case.
mascot
And
by
nothing
accident.
will be
It's
solved
awesome,
on this
and I
problem
love it.
until we first acknowledge
I
that
know,
it is a
right? Maybe when I
problem
get
and feel open and comfortable talking about
what is it?
And as
Affiliate?
long
Is that
as
the first thing you
we
get? Affiliate?
don't
You
feel
get like
comfortable and these conversations don't
I don't
happen,
know enough about
then
Twitch.
you know
So.
it's going to be real hard to make a dent in this problem. So that's all I got for this. So Sproticus, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll go next. So like I've said before, I think that druggy is the wrong word, because druggy gives off the vibe that we're not humanizing these people. People who are addicted to drugs need to be humanized. People need to understand that this is not them. This is them when they're not thinking correctly, when they're undergoing a mental illness. This is not who they are when they're when they're functioning correctly.
Yeah, I hope so. Maybe.
And the difference between
like
the
I
two.
said, I just like
When
having
a lot of people
fun.
bring up druggies,
Streaming for
all
whoever
they
wants to
think of
watch.
is that high crazy person who is
I'm not super
absolutely
concerned
insane, who
about it.
steals from people, who
I just
does
like
all
hanging
this
out with
stuff.
people
That's
and
not
talking and
who
having
they
real
are in regular life when they're
conversations.
sober.
That's my biggest thing.
And the goal is to get them sober, and to get them sober, we need to stop the stigmatizing of these people, because it only goes towards them not becoming sober, because they don't feel accepted by society anymore. They feel like if they're going to continue on these drugs, that when they come sober, that society's still going to hate them and call them a druggie, which I'm not going to lie, part of society is. But it's the part of finding the right friends, finding the right support group that's going to be able to accept you, that's going to be able to make you feel like your family. Because you're not born into a family, you choose your family. I'll say that again and again and again. It doesn't matter who you're born to. Okay.
We started at 8 and we're going to end here probably about
blood is
9:15,
thicker than water
9:20. So
is actually
that's what I
completely
would guess.
backwards. The way that saying started was the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb.
oh my
So
God, Zach.
you
Stop
can
with the
find
fucking
family
biblical.
outside of
Fucking A,
where
the
you
biblical
typically
bullshit.
think that you find family, and oftentimes they'll become even closer than you are with your family. So if you are addicted to drugs and you're listening to me right now, don't think that you're lost. You just need to take care of your problems, and you need to go find the people that are going to be able to help you, not the people that are going to drag you back down to where it used to be. You need to find people that are going to elevate you to where you need to be.
Big?
Yeah, so I think Zach kind of nailed it on the head there. I think if you have any issue with addiction, as much as you may feel like you can't get help, you can't reach out, I'm pretty sure that if you reach out to anybody in your support network, I think you can find the help you might need. At least, if not, they don't know directly, they can help point you in the right direction. Anybody who's listening tonight, just know that most people are here to help you, and try to avoid the bad actors. But I think if you reach out to people, they'll lend a helping hand. Like I said in the beginning, I think the biggest issue we had here was the healthcare system kind of dropping the ball in the original issue, and now that got cracked down on. We had the resorting to these street drugs like heroin and things like that. I think because of the fact that it becomes such an addiction, and I've seen that firsthand with myself. Like I said, I've taken things like Vicodin, Percocets, things like that. So I know how it can make you feel so good. You have this pill that makes you think you can get by, but in reality, it's really killing you. So if you have any type of issues, please reach out to somebody. I think that's the most important thing. If we can do one thing here, I think just having this discussion, kind of getting it out there, pointing people towards education about drug addiction and things like that. Anything we can do to help push this conversation forward is good. So if you do have any issues, please reach out to somebody and try to make that first step.
Take it, it's my turn.
Yep.
All right. So I think I made the points that I wanted to make effectively, so I don't want to rehash
What's
that.
up, dudes?
And I didn't really hammer on it a lot because this isn't my expertise. And I'm sorry, IPA, that we triggered the fuck out of you. I do love you, man.
All right.
But it does bring me up into
Barry.
the one thing I do want to say for my closing, and this is a point of activism, is that for a while I've been trying to pull together a right-wing healthcare panel. And the reason why is that, when I look at the Democrats, when I look at the left, is that they have Medicare for all, right? They're trying to push for something. And when I talk to right wingers, what our problem is that when it comes to healthcare, we're discombobulated. We don't seem to agree on like how to actually solve major issues when it comes to healthcare. And I want to make a call to action to my fellow right wingers that we need to have a serious conversation on what we want out of our healthcare situation. We need a concrete policy. We need to be able to market it. We need to put it in a box and ship it to the American people to say, look, this is how we want to fix the system. This is how we're going to help you. And right now we are absolutely failing to do that. And I'm going to end with that.
Yeah, I thought that was a great first topic. Now the next one might get a little more contentious. I just want to reiterate, this was no one on this panel picked these topics. Also, I don't think she'll mind me saying Samantha did message us and said that she's having some internet issues and things like that. So it wasn't that she intentionally, and that stuff happens. I certainly, my power was flickering earlier. I was like, oh shit. So like, I get it. That stuff happens. So Samantha's second topic that she had for us, it's kind of a long one. So I'm sure we'll be able to break it down in multiple parts. Topic 2, what are your thoughts on white people all being labeled conservative and racist without hearing their positions or motives on anything? Are we able to acknowledge that while not all conservatives or white people are racist, there has been a rise in the amount of racists bringing down the communities as a whole and ruining it for others? So sort of two-parter there. One, what's everyone's thought on white people being labeled you're automatically conservative or racist without listening to them? And second, can we acknowledge that there are a rise of racists that are in right conservative or white communities? Let's start with Tiberius. You want to start, and we'll just
I want to swing. I want to swing so hard at this. Yeah,
go ahead,
okay.
Tiberius.
All right.
Tiberius is waiting for this all week. He's been licking his lips.
It. So I want to swing hard at this because there's a level where I can get where it is, but there's a level where it just goes to hell. Because for me, talking to people and the data that I've seen in polling, because this is where something I do know something about, is that white people are not the most conservative voters by far. It's Hispanics and the black community, actually. Okay, now there's some problems with that. I'm going to hit that later. But at least when it comes to this, is that just putting white people in a box, being like, you're all conservative, you're all fascists, you're all Nazis. We saw that last week. As soon as the all-white everything panel was announced, is that is the general trend. That is some fucking racist-ass bullshit, and it needs to stop. And the problem that I've got with my fellow right-wingers is that we did not do anything to call that shit out. We should have been like, look, the left's racism is completely on display. It's like they've openly got an anti-white thing going on right there. But here's the real thing. Do we have serious race problems in the regards that we have racial tension? Absolutely.
Hey,
but a lot of the problems that I've seen,
I love you.
And
thanks
one
for
community
coming in.
versus the next is that it permeates throughout multiple communities. There is a lot of reasons that we can have solidarity, whether you're white, you're black, you're Asian, Hispanic, whatever. None of these are to the point to where we can't. It's specifically like a white person issue or a black person issue or what have you. There's way too much things that we have solidarity. We should have solidarity on, and that's something that we need to work on, both on the right wing and on the left wing, respectively. And I don't want to get on my soapbox too much, so I'll close out with this. The problem I have with the left wing is that they are now so fixated on fighting racism, they've openly become racist themselves. The problem that I have with my fellow right wingers is that sometimes we don't give it enough credit. We don't listen to the issues of other communities because we are predominantly made of white people as voters, and yet when it comes down to the data, we have entire voting groups that should be voting with us that aren't. And that communicates that there is an absolute failure in communication or an absolute failure in policy to reach out to people who actually agree with us. And I'll end with that.
Biggs?
Yeah, so I think Tiberius hit it on the head with that. I think that when you look at the actual demographics, especially the most outspoken lefties tend to be white in general. At least that's what I've seen. So I think that that's part of the issue. I really don't think it matters what type of like politics you have. I think your race is completely just separate from that. Like Tiberius said, like the more conservative voters and the more conservative tendencies tend to be Hispanic and African American just because of their like cultural ingrained I don't know how to put it, like family values, I guess you'd say. So I think that's just completely false. I do think that the white leftists do tend to kind of try to point that, especially when you have like somebody like, like like Rob Noerr, I know you get this a lot, right? You get this like completely like even if they're trying to have a conversation with you, they have this presupposition of like what your views are going to be, right? So I think that does have that for a specific demographic of people, especially like the right-wing people on the internet. But I think overall in society, I think that's completely false. I think it's completely ridiculous, and I think your race has zero to do with what your actual political affiliations are or your policy stances are.
Sprout?
Okay, so with me, the topic, I think that the first part of the topic, which is what are your thoughts on white people all being labeled conservative, racist, not hearing their positions or motives on anything, that is inherently racist on its face. To go ahead and to label an entire race as one thing is racist on its face, and you really cannot say that it's otherwise. And so I'll leave that there because that's a pretty simple statement. The second part of that question,
Barry's my
it's where it gets
co-host.
a little bit more complicated. Are we able to acknowledge that while not all conservatives or white people are racist, there has been a rise in the amount of racists bringing down the communities as a whole and ruining it for others? I would highly disagree with that. I don't think there's been a rise of racism. I think there's been a decrease of racism. Unfortunately, the racists that are left have become louder and louder and louder. And through wokeness or through whatever you want to call it, these people keep retweeting these racist tweets and talk about it and keep drawing more and more attention to it. And that's why they're getting louder. If we treated it like it was and just left it alone and no one retweeted it, no one talked about it, we just leave them in obscurity, I think we would see a totally different totally different place where they don't think that their views are being recognized, and maybe they'd be able to rethink their views and to be able to understand that what they're doing is inherently wrong. I think that wokeness has had the exact opposite intent that it was supposed to, and it's just made racist voices louder because that's all you hear on news nowadays is you hear the minority of things that are happening that are evil, right? They want to
It's literally
gravitate,
putting
they
a
want to get
magnifying
clicks.
glass on
So
racism.
they're gonna pull up these issues that aren't very prevalent in normal life, and they may find it one place here, one place there every now and then, but they'll bring it up and talk about it for as long as they can until the next thing
Barry's
comes along.
an independent.
And I think that's the real issue.
He's obviously of the Irish
creating the race war
persuasion.
is that the media is playing into it. The media is playing into
maybe
the
part
race
of the Green
war,
Party. I
and
don't
they're
know
trying
for
to
sure.
divide us against ourselves. If we could take a
But,
look at this
it's all
without
good.
looking at it through I'm part of this political party, I'm part of that political party, you can see us pretty easily. Where
Barry, I don't.
just
Okay,
with
so
BLM,
Operation
you can see
Madman.
the left.
Barry's a little bit
the
of an
left
inside
news
joke
channels
from
praise
our
BLM,
Discord,
and the right news
but
channels
basically my
demonize
daughter
BLM no
uses
matter what
Barry
happened.
as her
And BLM did some
arm
rights and BLM did some wrongs. But no matter what
aggression, I would
happened,
say.
the left and the right both had
So Barry
their
beats
sides.
my ass
where one
when my
praised
daughter's
and
mad at
one
me.
just demonized. And so I
And
think that
Barry
if we
is the
stop
greatest debate bro
this,
ever. Will crush any other debate
this
bro, no matter what.
oversimplification of issues, and we actually talk about issues and we leave racists to stay in obscurity, then I think that this entire issue will take care of itself.
I'll go. Wick, do you want to end it, or you can go now if you want?
Oh,
I
it
give
doesn't.
you the last
Either way,
word.
which one.
Okay,
Barry's
I'll go,
awesome.
And then
I love
you can
Barry.
have the last word on it, and then we'll do open. So anyone who's watched me enough knows that I can talk a lot. I could probably give a 2-hour opening statement. I will try not to. I will try to be. So the idea of, I say it when I open almost any panel that I'm on.
Did
that
mommy
I'm a
tell you how
populist
much was left?
conservative,
Was
and
that
that
all?
I
Was that the
feel
last of it?
that people in positions of power
That was
are
it?
trying to divide us based on immutable characteristics like race, sexual orientation, etc. Because it's an excuse they could play that game to cause division, and we don't look
There's
and
not the
say,
rest of the
wait a
juice,
minute,
there's
why
the
are
rest
all
of the
these
other
people
stuff?
in positions of power not
Okay.
doing things that help us
Hey,
out, particularly
hey,
in
thank you for letting
politics
Barry
and
co-host
media
with-
and other places like
You wanna
that.
co-host
So
with-
I think
with
that
me
this
for a
is
minute
an
too,
intentional
with
wedge issue.
Barry?
Now, I like Samantha. I think that this question's sort of worded a little poorly, so there's many ways we could take it. So the first section of it, are all white people considered conservative and racist? No. I think that what you see is with the progressive stack that we see. Which
can't
is
check the
idea of
Octagon
using cultural
General
Marxism,
because
where we are
I've
all
got
judged
stuff
based
going
on
on.
immutable characteristics, where based on certain categories
doing?
we're either oppressor or oppressed.
Say
What
hi.
happens is that you could
Talk in the
every one of
microphone.
us could find a category that we're oppressed in, and that victimhood
I know
becomes
it.
power. But the
You don't
only
want
way
to?
you could obtain that
You tell 'em a
victimhood
story?
is, and this is the most important thing, you have to agree with their ideology. So, for
Tell 'em
example,
your
if you're in a group that
stories.
they usually consider oppressed, like a
Almost
black woman,
One
well, you don't
monster
get
that
any of that
gonna be
adulation
creepy.
unless you
Is it gonna be
agree
creepy?
with this sort of
What is
cultural
it?
Well,
Marxist
tell 'em a
doctrine.
creepy
So,
story.
because of that, if we
Well,
look at
the
this
creepy
question on
story
face
has
value, are
dragons
all
in
white
it.
Has
people considered
dragons in
racist
it?
and conservative?
Yeah.
No.
And
Not
what
if you
else?
virtue signal. Not if you
There's
say, oh,
flames
no.
in
I
it.
think it's dangerous to
Flames?
have an all
There's
white panel.
lots of
I'm
kinds
ashamed
of
to be white.
flames.
Lots
I
of
think,
kinds of.
oh
Do the
my
dragon
God,
breathe
I'm
flames?
racist. We all have all
Yeah.
this racism.
Yeah.
Then you're
What
given
color?
a pass. What it's
Blue,
really about is
purple,
your skin
red,
color juxtaposed with your
and
ideology.
orange.
And that's
Blue,
why
purple, red,
Biggs
and orange.
correctly brings
Wow,
up,
that's
I
amazing.
get shit all the time. Why?
And then
Because
it
I'm
makes
a vocal
a rainbow if
I'll
the
be on
best
panels
of
quite
the
often where
fire
it's me and
if the
7
best
people on the
of
left,
those
or it's
colors
me and
out.
3 people
They
on the
flash
right
all the
and 4
colors at
people
once
on
and
the
makes a
left.
rainbow
But the
flame?
3 people on the right
Yeah.
are like,
What's
well,
the
I'm
rainbow
moderate,
flame
and I
do?
basically agree with the left and all this. And then what happens? Anyone who's watching these sees,
Someone
oh,
down
we don't
and
hate
then
all
there are
conservatives. Those other
signed
3 conservatives
ones.
were
Oh,
good. It was
yeah?
just rough. I do not have a racist bone in my body.
Rainbow sign.
I'm sure that there is
Rainbow
a small
shine.
amount of racism that's
And then what
inherent in everyone
happens?
just through human nature.
Then
But as far as
it-
being an
then it
overt
will live
racist or something like
forever,
that is a
never.
bullshit charge to
Never, never,
levy at me,
never.
and I don't take it serious
And the
anymore.
next
And
story
anyone
is
who
going
knows
to
me or
be
has
a
watched
little
what I said instead
creepy.
of watching what people
Okay.
say I said could understand
have
that that's the case.
A big
I think that
flaming
the focus on race
dragons
is
that have
intentional. It's used to
big
discredit
flames.
people whose
like
arguments that
purple,
people on the
red,
left disagree with,
blue,
and it's certainly used by those in positions of power to do this.
and
Now, to the
rainbow.
second part of the
Can you tell
question,
everybody
is there
how
a
old
rise
you
in
are?
racism in the community? I assume they mean on
Okay.
Twitch or on YouTube.
I'm
And
free.
if that's the case, I don't know.
What's coming
I don't
up?
follow a lot of other streamers in the community. I have the
Tell
people
them.
I like interacting with. I'll watch Tiberius. I'll
I
watch,
don't
you
know.
know, Lecture Fan. I'll watch Critical
Why not?
Thinking Veteran. I'll watch
Friends.
Destiny. I'll watch
Why?
Dylan Burns. I'll watch Sansol. But that's
'Cause
about
I
it. I don't watch a
know
lot of
what
people.
all
Not
your
that they're not
friends'
talented people or that
names
they're
are.
not great.
That's
But I
okay.
couldn't put the pulse of what the
How many
Twitch community or the
millions?
YouTube community
So
or
right
the
now I'm
online
talking
community
to
is doing.
Sprouticus,
I do know this in general.
Noerr,
Racism charges are being
Tiberius, and
massively
Wick.
overblown over and over and
And I've
over
got some
to
people
the
in my
point
chat
where
that
we
get
could look
Liquid
out our window
Sunshine,
and see that one
Thick
side has
Pool,
rioted
Operation
over and over
Madman,
and over again. But we're
Looter,
told to ignore that, and the real problem
Computer
is white
Carnage.
supremacy. And as long as they have that
It's
boogeyman, they'll be
Computer
able to issue a new
Carnage.
domestic war on terror.
Computer
They'll be
Carnage
able to
is
have
kind
a
of
Patriot
a
Act, except this
kind
time
of a
it's directed
crazy
at
guy.
Americans,
Which one
and it's
is
directed at
him?
people based on their skin
He's
color
on my
and
he's in my
political
chat.
ideology.
He's not on the
All
the
of this
Twitch.
is to
He's
say
not on the
this.
Discord.
I'm sick and tired of people judging me based on my
Well,
skin
what's
color.
the
I'm
other
sick and tired of
dude's
people
name?
assuming that I'm
What's the
racist
other
if I don't agree with them.
4 names?
It is
I told
absolute
you that's
garbage, and it's
Sproutacus,
weak-minded people
Rob
that do it.
Noerr.
And it's
Which
people
one
that,
is
if they want to go
Sproutacus?
to this, like, let me
Right
just
here.
give you some things I've heard in
That's
the past.
Sproutacus.
I can't deal with
And
strong
this
black.
one
If
is
I'm on
the
a panel
one
and
that
I'm
you
arguing with
told
someone
me
who's on the
that
left,
was
and they happen to be
Adam
black,
one.
well, it must
There's
be I'm a
Rob,
racist. I can't deal with
there's
strong
Wick,
black men.
and
Never
there's
mind the fact
Tiberius.
how many people that are white, that are women, that are
Those
men, that are
are
trans,
like all your
etc., etc., that
friends.
Yep,
I've
they're
gone
all my
after just
friends.
as hard.
And
It's just
I really
ridiculous.
don't
And
know
I'm sick
her.
and tired of the fact that we can't even have a
I don't
panel
know
where we're
where
going
the
to talk about
house
issues like
is.
the opioid
Well, they all live
epidemic
in their own
without
houses.
having many people
Well,
that
where
are
all
very
the
vocal
house is.
on
I
the
don't
left
know.
stand up and say, well, we're afraid to allow that
But
panel
which
to occur.
house do?
We can't talk
Which
about
house?
those issues.
Which
Oh, here we
house?
go. White people
Which
pretending they're the
which
victim.
color's
It's
their
nonsense.
house?
It's causing
Well, what's
division in this
everyone on their
country. And until we
stream?
get a handle on letting
Well,
these
see,
people know
wiping their
that people aren't
house.
monolithic based on
Yeah.
their skin color or
And
even
every
their
different
political
color I
ideology,
see
Yeah,
it.
they're all
and we
different colors.
stop
They're all in
allowing
different
them to
houses.
divide us based
Yeah.
on this,
Yeah.
these problems won't
What
get any
different
better.
houses
Sorry, I
make
was
them
wordy there,
into
but go ahead, Wick.
rainbows?
I don't know.
Okay.
Well, I never
Wow.
seen the
A
rainbow.
lot to unpack
Yeah,
from all
alright.
these statements.
I gotta let you go, okay?
We
I
were
love you,
doing
babe.
so well, gang. I was with you. I was
Thanks for
like,
my
wow,
drink.
this panel is going great. You know, we're solving issues. We're talking about issues. We're all pretty much in agreement. Gang, I think we're gonna have to.
Can
We're
I
gonna have to-
interject here? Can I interject here?
I haven't even
Hey,
finished my opening
Leave
statement.
him
but
do
go-
his opening. Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, then you can interject all you like. I haven't even said anything, except for I think I'm gonna say some things.
That's kind of the point.
Nope, take it out.
So I will say this at the start. I do agree
No.
that the pushback against the all-white everything and the pushback against white people having a space to talk about white people problems was ridiculous. What did they think was going to happen? that we were going to put on our robes, grab our torches, and then the ritual would begin, and Armageddon would rain down, and racism would be reapplied. No, that's nonsense. Okay, I consider myself on the left in many issues.
It went
I didn't do
surprisingly
any of that
well.
nonsense. Yes,
thought.
it was the complaint afterwards by those same people was that it was too boring.
Yeah, it
that
wasn't spicy enough. Yep, exactly. Yep.
What did they want here? That I will agree with you, but I'm going to push back hard on this idea that the racism is being portrayed as is a tool of the media to divide us and be a wedge issue. When we talk about racism in the media, I think this is a good thing that we're focusing on it because it's raising awareness. Do I think racism is on the rise in America? No, not when you take a look out in the last 30, 40 years. I think it has gone down. We are reducing. It's going in the opposite direction, as Sprout said. However, one of the reasons this is happening is because we're focusing on it, is because the media is drawing attention to it. It's because protest groups are going out there and giving a voice to these people who haven't had a voice before, and because America and the people are growing more and more aware of these issues, we're able to identify them and attack them. I do not think that is a bad thing at all. I will agree with you that in some cases it is being used as a weapon, and I denounce
The
that.
media is always
Anytime
lying.
that it is being done, I push back against that hard. I don't know if you gang have
The
seen me
media is
on these
always
panels,
lying.
but I get a lot of shit because I push back against it because I think it's
Never
terrible.
trust the
and I think
media.
it's
It's
hurting the
always
cause
lying.
overall. But when we
They're
talk
always
about
trying to
race issues in
spin.
America, when we talk about to the question at hand, are the people on the left painting all whites and as conservative, racist? That is happening in a very, very small segment. It's happening, but reports of it are being overblown. It's happened to me personally, but again, it's being overblown. It's in very contained space currently. Now, when we get to the second
A
question, is
lot of the
racism on
left
the
attacking
rise?
the left.
I think no, actually, it's on the decline if we look past in the last 40 years. However,
Yeah,
awareness
maybe.
of it is going up.
I am
The
the
ADL,
media,
for
sure.
example, just started a new way of tracking hate crimes and things like that back in 2016. Before that, they didn't really have
mainstream
a measure
media,
to track it.
obviously.
So yes, it looks like from the data that the numbers are going up, but that's because we didn't track the data in the same way previously because we didn't care about it. And the fact that we
What?
care about it now is good. The fact that we care about it and we're pointing to it now is
That
a
was
good
weird. I don't
thing.
know what
And it
happened
should
there.
be celebrated. And I think attacking that is somewhere where I'm going to have to draw the line and say I'm not okay with that. That's all.
So my interjection from the beginning, Rob, I know that you turned off channel points timeouts, but I didn't know if I could put 2,000 channel points and just have Wick sit this topic out. I didn't know if that was possible or not. I wanted to address that with you.
The silent,
No,
like I
I'm
get
glad
silenced
to
by
have
the left, I
someone
get silenced by the right. What's going on here?
Hey,
No,
Wick,
I'm just trolling.
I know,
as
but
the resident
I
centrist,
do
I
wanna-
vouch for Wick.
I actually do want to talk to you because it'd be annoying to have a right circle jerk. I complain about left circle jerks all the time, and I complain just much about a right circle jerk. But with that being said, I think that the media is playing race war. I think that the media is they're picking and choosing which topics they want to talk about on stream or on live because of what narrative it fits. If such as Asian hate, Asian people were killed far more by black people than they are by white people, but the news only nationalize the media of white people killing Asian people to fit a narrative. And that's all the media is focused on doing is fitting
What's up,
narratives. If it doesn't fit within the narrative, it won't get any coverage until it's blown
He's
up so
tired
much
now?
on
Okay. Barry's
Facebook
going
or
to bed,
Twitch or
everybody.
Twitter that the news
night-night,
media
Barry.
is forced to cover it because
Tell
if they
Barry
don't
good
cover
night.
it, then they'll seem biased. And this happens on the left and the right, just with the different stances. I think the media is there to divide us, not actually give us the news. And so I think that
Trump
that
will
Americans
not
should pay
divide
far
us.
more attention to these central
The media
media
will not divide us.
stations where they
Media
actually
will not
talk about the
divide
issues,
us.
where they actually talk about what's going on,
Barry
and
will
stop
be
paying
back
attention to
next
CNN
time,
or
everybody.
Fox
Okay,
News.
don't be sad. Barry will be back.
Where they're only going to get
My
one
co-host
version of what's
Barry,
going on, because
my
usually when
silent
something
partner.
happens, there's the right side version of events, there's the left side version of
gosh,
events,
Zach,
and
shut
then
up.
what actually happens is somewhere in between the middle of those. And so I think it's important for Americans to realize this, but if you only listen to CNN, if you only listen to Fox News, then you're only going to receive the biased point of view that it's a self-bias, right? So you're on the right side, so you listen to Fox News, and they're going to tell you the bias that you want. Which of course works for clicks, it works for ads, it gets Fox News or CNN money, but at the same time, it doesn't allow the regular people who watch those
Green Party,
programs
yes.
regularly.
The Green
it doesn't
Party is
give them
represented in
the
spirit. Okay?
understanding of what actually
Just because he's
happened.
not here in his
It just
corporeal
confirms
form,
their
it doesn't mean he's not
self-bias.
here in spirit. Okay.
Okay,
So
but
there's Go ahead, Wick.
Okay.
I'll let you
Yeah,
respond.
just to respond to that, like I don't disagree with your main premise here that the news panders to its audience, and I don't disagree that we need a balanced media diet. You shouldn't be just listening to one source for your information. You should gather your information from lots of sources. That's one of the reasons I came on this panel, because rather than simply getting cheered on, yes, Queen, you go, girl, by all the lefties, I'd rather have my ideas challenged, because again, my channel name is Death of Certainty. I might be wrong here, and I'd like to have some back and forth on it.
I want to say
That
some funny
said,
things, but I just feel like I
this
can't butt in. It's
problem
funny.
is a profit problem. It isn't a race war problem. The
A
media
profit
isn't trying to
problem?
instigate a race war. What they're trying to do is to make money.
That's
Now,
true. Yeah, that's definitely
incentives are
true.
important here, and we can see how the profit incentives have created this, as you said, this kind of clickbaity thing where people are more likely to
There's
get outraged at the
there's
titles and things
studies
like
that show
that.
that outrage provides more clicks.
Well, yeah, of course,
100%.
of
Yep.
course. Indeed, I agree with that 100%. But again, when you conflate that and when you take
I
that
know. I
that
just feel like
premise
I've
that we
got
agree
things to
on,
say, but I
and then
can't
you
say
go
it, so I just say
steps
it in here.
further, and when you walk off the cliff, as I like to call it, of reasoning, where you're like, well, because this is the case and we see this data,
I'm just
it
too
must
damn
mean
nice. I
that the
can't
media
like
is trying to get us into a
interrupt
race war.
people. I feel
That
like I
I
got to
can't
give
go
people the
with you
chance
on
to
there,
talk.
friend.
Okay,
I
so
just don't think it's true.
the idea of race war, it's not a race war like that they want, white people fighting black people. That's not what it is. It's that they want to cause division because that division allows them and the other people in the establishment to obtain power.
Yeah, make it
and
spicy
to
for
keep
the
the power
left.
that they have by denying the focus on them. For
Yeah,
example,
rage
trust in the
click
media is at an
rage
all-time
generates
low.
clicks
So
much
sure, it's
more than any
clickbaity that
other
when they push this race
feeling
stuff
from a
that they
person.
get
If you can
viewership,
generate
but
like
it also serves the double
aggression and
purpose
rage
of
from somebody, they're
denying
100%
the people looking
more likely to
into
click on it
why
than
the
just
trust
some
in them is
general
so low,
like
because they push this garbage all the time.
um,
So, like,
hyperlink
to
or
Wick,
something.
like, let me ask you some questions. Like, you're pushing back on this. Do you agree with the head of the FBI and our generals that say that the biggest problem in this country is white supremacy?
No,
Oh,
that's
That was
ridiculous.
a
okay.
question
It,
to Wick.
it's to Wick.
Sure.
Okay.
I would say that the biggest terrorist threat, yes, but the biggest problem, no. I
And
think
can
the
you show me
climate
your
change.
data where you get that that's the biggest terror threat?
Again,
Wow.
I haven't researched this as much as I should, but this is what they
Okay,
say, and
biggest
I do
terrorist
trust
threat?
my institutions at least a
All
little.
right.
Sure. Well, so for example, there was a study that came out that was cited by the political sphere, not just on Twitch, but was cited by Congress people and things like that, was from the Center for Strategic Intelligence Services. And they defined domestic terrorism. Let me see if I can remember this. It's a very easy definition. It's basically when non-governmental groups, so private groups, use violence or intimidation to obtain political power or for a political agenda. Now, that sounds exactly like what we saw 223 riots from Black Lives Matter, locations of riots from Black Lives Matter. But the Center for Strategic Intelligence Study says, well, we don't count Black Lives Matter in those riots as domestic terrorism. Why? Even though it meets their definition? Just because they don't count it. That's why. And this is the problem we see. We could believe our institutions or our lying eyes. We could see which side has engaged in more violence over the past 2 years. It's indisputable. And we can see that these numbers are intentionally skewed, or the data is looked at from a certain angle to demonize one group of people. For example, Sproticus brought up the idea of hate crimes. Overwhelmingly, if we're looking at what race proportionally commits more hate crimes, it's easily Black people. In fact,
Thank you
we
everybody
heard
for
about
stopping in, by the way.
rise
I
in
really
Asian American
appreciate you
hate
guys
crimes, and it
hopping
was
in here
blamed
and
on
saying
Trump
hello and
supporters and white people.
hopping in the
We
chat.
heard the
It's really
same
awesome
story
that you guys
about
are all taking the
2018
time to
when it
come in
came to
here
New York
and
City. There was a rise of
enjoy this
anti-Semitic hate
panel
crimes.
here.
Well, in both cases, the problem was it wasn't white people. And as soon as we started to look into the data, and we saw that overwhelmingly the data from the same institutions that you say you trust showed that the majority of these attacks were coming from people of color, all of a sudden we didn't care about those hate crimes anymore. Who cares that those Asian people in New York are getting beat up by people of color? Who cares that the Jews in New York are getting beat up by people of color? All of a sudden that wasn't a big story. And instead we had to keep focusing on any story we could possibly had that made white people in whole look bad. The demand for racism from white people is so outpacing the actual racism that we have in this country that our institutions fall for every single hoax that comes out that tries to paint the narrative. The Covington kids, the Smollett situation, the Bubba Wallace situation. If racism was as prevalent as we're being told, then surely they wouldn't have to fall for all these hoaxes. So I'm sorry, I just disagree. I'm not denying that racism from white people doesn't exist, but why is it you say it's important to talk about? Is it only
Yes.
important to talk about racism from white
No,
people?
I've never said that.
Okay, and do you think that we talk about racism from white people a lot?
In certain Twitch spaces, obvious. Yeah.
It's in every institution.
And-
Almost every
but I-
corporation was celebrating Black Lives. Can you show me one major corporation or one major political thing that talked about the problem of the rise in anti-Asian hate crimes coming from the
Oh
Black
yes.
community?
Well, first of all, what do you consider major? But I go on realclearpolitics.com. That's where I get most of my day-to-day news.
Okay.
And there's a lot. The Spectator. I can't fucking name them off the top of my head, but there's 3 or 4 publications that were really hard in pushing this narrative. You only see the narrative that you're talking about from the more left-leaning organizations, but there is definitely the other narrative going on, the 1350 meme, and other things that you see pushed in right-wing spaces. And we talk about right-wing, or let's
1350
not say right-wing
meme.
terrorism,
Oh,
because
well.
I don't think that's true. I misspoke.
Crazy.
My apologies. But when we talk about white supremacy and white extremism, we see a rise in these movements. We see a definite kind of change in behavior of how they're operating that's worrisome, and I think that's what the FBI and other institutions are pointing to and saying the way they are going about recruiting, the way they are going about performing their tasks, the way they are going about like QAnon's. There's plenty of people that are running as Republicans that believe in the QAnon conspiracy. This is an issue, and just because there's also issues in other groups, and I'm not denying that,
Is
not
QAnon
denying
white
at all.
supremacist? It's
It
racist?
has a lot of ties to that, a lot of ties to the Jewish question, as they call it. I won't repeat that here.
What's
Would
But-
you, okay,
so
real
wait?
quick,
No,
would
where are
you
the
also-
ties?
Go ahead.
Where are the ties to the Jewish question? Because I've looked into QAnon because it was talked about a lot. It was talked about a lot, and I've looked into it and I've followed it pretty closely. Not that I believe in not that I believe in what QAnon was spewing, but I never saw the Jewish question even raised once in the amount of
Well, that's-
sources that I've looked at. So you drawing ties to this, you're demonizing something with something that was never even said within the community.
But that's their main contention, is that the shadowy
That is not
organization.
that's not their main contention. Their main contention is that there's a cabal, and this cabal
Yes.
runs the government. No, a cabal does not mean Jewish. A cabal just means a secret government that is on
The
the inside.
language that they use, the rhetoric that they use, is almost indistinguishable from the rhetoric used when other
Sure.
groups have posed this
Same
Jewish question.
with
It's an
the Squad
issue.
and the BDS movement, right? You criticize the left. Their rhetoric's very similar to white supremacy.
Some of them, some black supremacist groups have very similar rhetoric.
No.
The
The Squad and BDS, that's mainstream Democrats.
BD,
not say black
BDS, I don't know the acronym.
Boycott,
off the-
divest, sanction.
I'm not familiar with that group, to be very honest with
Let's
you.
leave Tiberius and Biggs get in.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I do want to get in on this one because, like, look, this is the problem where you guys are going on this particular conversation. And look, I'd love to bitch about the left, but I don't think this is productive. I really, I don't. And I don't want to stamp on Wicks here either. So the thing the thing that I want to get into, if I can redirect or if you guys will take the bait, is like the whole racial statistics thing, whether it's, the conversation of white privilege because white people are doing so well, or Asian privilege or what have you, or 1350. This stuff, regardless of if it has some kind of statistical variance, should not be used as an argument for people. Because I'm just going to say it's unethical as fuck. It is like racism personified in statistics. There are problems. We need to have that conversation, and sometimes it bears out in different communities for that. But on the other side of that is going around and for the left to go, hey, white people are privileged, or these people are privileged, or for the right, which some righties have done this shit, where it's like, hey, black people are the root of all evil because 1350 or whatever. This shit needs to stop. This is unethical as fucking hell. We shouldn't fall into this trap at all.
Okay, I don't disagree that there are ways to use those sorts of statistics that are unethical. But the problem is, we're
Is
not
that
talking
you?
about fringe.
I
there's
hope
some people on
not.
Twitter.
God, I fucking hope
Rob
not.
said one thing and Wick said another. That's fine. I like
Yeah,
Wicks, but we have a limited, audience.
Yeah,
We're
I'm a
average-
singular. It's just Wick, just to be clear. It's
Yeah,
Wick,
yeah.
not
My
Wick.
bad.
When
It's
we
okay.
have people at the highest levels of government in our
He's
intel
just singular. He
agencies,
ain't
in our
plural.
FBI, in our
He ain't
political
motherfucking
system,
plural
in other
here.
institutions that want to focus solely on one thing. It's white supremacy. We're literally, like, we mentioned the ADL. Did you know that just this week, the ADL announced that they're working with PayPal to get extremists off the platform and to give their information on how they finance their extremism? Well, who's the ADL defined as extremist? Who knows? Probably people
Arbitrary.
that have said things about QAnon. It's totally arbitrary. So the reason I bring this up, I don't want to cite these statistics. don't think that people are monolithic because of their skin color. But when I have someone coming at me going, hate crimes, rise in Asian American hate crimes, holy shit, like MSNBC, the New York Times,
I love
CNN,
Rob.
Washington Post,
Rob is
Democrat
so funny.
politicians.
He's so
And then
good.
you look at the data and you're like, dude, the data says the opposite. Or here's a more even timely, it's all these damn Trump supporters that won't get vaccinated. These damn white Trump supporters, they're endangering us all. Only guess what happens when you look at the data? That's not who it is it? The group that's far less, the most likely to not be vaccinated is people in the Black community. I don't judge people in the Black community based on that. I don't give a shit. I'm just saying it in response to the argument that people are trying to racialize everything. This particular race is a problem. And then when you look at the data, you're like, wait a minute, where are you getting that from? When we can see that the data goes the opposite way. And then they say what you say. Oh, well, you're a bigot. You're bringing up the data.
Yeah.
How else are you going to push back?
No. Well, my thing is that, look, this is the thing I think the right has been failing on massively, is that we keep feeding this fucking beast boy or engaging with it, when we just need to be like, look, you're fucking racist as shit, dude. You need to stop this shit, or I'm not fucking talking to you. And that literally just needs to be that conversation in a nutshell. We feed.
Go ahead. For us, but what about with Christopher Wray? What about with Joe Biden? What about with Kamala Harris? What about with the ADL?
Yeah. So here's my thing about this, right? Is that I think there's a lot of people, and I've talked to this, the Black community, I've talked to Hispanics about this, is that they hate this fucking shit. They really fucking do. They hate hearing Kamala and Joe talk about all these issues, and the whole thing is like, if you don't vote for me, you're not Black, right? It's cringe as shit. And honestly, I think the big thing that the right needs to do that we're doing that is wrong is that we keep feeding this fucking bitch and we keep giving it fuel. We need to go like, look, you know what? Democrats are being Democrats. They're being a bunch of dumbasses. They only care about your race. They only care about your skin color. They only care about your sex. They are the identity politics party because they have nothing else to run on. That's what we need to market this shit as, when we actually can go after policy that is across the board better for the American people. That's what we need to do. And we need to just act like, you know what? These people, that's all they care about. That's what we just need to throw them under the rug when it comes to this shit. I don't know if you guys want to agree with me on it, but this whataboutism thing, or like, I don't think it's completely unproductive.
Yeah,
absolutely across the board.
I agree with you, Tiberius. I think that the whole the racialization of everything is kind of ridiculous, and I think you're right. When we need to focus on policies, we need to focus on real world solutions. That's kind of why I want to bring to Twitch as a whole. I feel like we have a lot of this rhetoric that goes on. We don't have any real solutions to the problem. So with this type of thing, we have to take it upon ourselves to show, if people question our beliefs, if they call us racist, we say, no, hey, this is what I believe. This is why I believe it. And if you can formulate that in a way that somebody else can understand, that's one step closer to understanding each other. And as much as people want to push back against that, as long as you have a firm foundation of what your beliefs are, and you can stand on those, and you have legitimate concerns and things like that, you should be able to contemplate what policies would be best for what you believe. And I think that's the problem, is a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people just are wishy-washy, or they just want to go with the trends or whatever. And I think if we hold firm to our beliefs, we have the ability to kind of not only describe our beliefs, but also to back up our beliefs, then we can stand firm and say, this is what we think should happen, no matter what your race or what your political ideology is.
Okay, so
go ahead.
Okay, I do kind of agree with Tiberius and Biggs here, but I do want to push back against the misinformation that's been dropped. I think that we have data on this, we have resources.
Good old
on this.
misinformation.
While yes, that the Black community hasn't been vaccinated the same right as, say, the Asian community or the white community, they only make up about 16% of the population. We also have data that shows that by and large, and I'm looking at it right now. Hold on, let me pull it up. That out of Republicans, 49% are unvaccinated, and that makes up a much larger group. So I understand we need to talk about both groups, but again, the weight of the problem, it is not incorrect to say that Republicans not being vaccinated are causing an issue. And I'll drop it here.
Okay,
I'll stop it here, and we can move on to more productive.
Okay, wait a second, because I'm gonna have to push back. I have to. There's no stopping this. So
there's no stopping him.
You understand it's not a vaccine, right? This thing's being branded as a vaccine.
That is not a vaccine.
It's not a vaccine.
Excuse me?
It's not a vaccine. It's therapeutic, if nothing else. It doesn't stop you from getting COVID. It doesn't stop you from transmitting COVID.
Okay.
What?
That's
No.
fair.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Oh, God.
I can pull up the statistics to prove
What's
this.
going on here?
I
It's
gotta go
not
take a
still
piss.
the
I'll be
vaccine.
right back.
The
So
I'm
it
taking a
survival
lowers-
piss.
rate, even if you get it again,
It
even if
lowers
you
the
get it again,
symptoms. It
the
lowers the
survival
sympt-
rate goes way up. The
It lowers the
benefits to
symptom.
being vaccinated are so big. What's
lowers
going
the
on
Let's
here?
have this conversation. It has nothing to
Okay.
do with the
Can
topic.
we-
It has
okay,
nothing
that's
to do with the topic
Let's off
whatsoever.
board.
That's fine. I just
I'm
can't,
willing
I can't
to do a
stand it
panel
being
where we
brought
can
up.
talk. I could do a panel when we talk about the COVID. I'll just say this on that number. Like, notice that we conflated we switched from black people to Republicans. And when we're talking, and this is something that always happens, like the way that the data could be spun by people like this, for example, they'll say things like this. Well, actually, more white people get welfare than black people, which is true. That's a true statement. But then if you look at the same and say, well, actually, more white people are shot and killed by the cops than black people, they'll say, yeah, but not per capita. You got to look at, so anytime it fits the left's argument, you look at the total numbers. And then when it doesn't fit, you look at the percentage numbers. Now, just to push back against bigots and Tiberius, I have to say, I maybe if we got into more nuance to this, and maybe we will, I would agree with you more. But I have to say, I cannot disagree with you more in the way that it's being put. It is a loser's argument. Right? It is exactly, it's the same argument I used to have with postmodernists, where you would have this argument with the postmodernist left that would say, well, actually, we've been reading Foucault and we've been reading Heidegger. And what we need to do is step back from society because society is so corrupt. So we'll step back. We're not going to engage in the voting process. And then the George Bushes of the world went, great, go ahead and step back. Absolutely. We hope that every left-wing anti-war person says, well, I'm not going to vote anymore. Absolutely, you're right. Go ahead. Go live in your little communes and hit your drum circle. We'll continue to have all the power in this country. That's exactly what's going on in the left right now. So if the right says, well, we just won't engage with the obvious race baiting, we'll let them keep calling us racist. We'll allow the generals, for example, to have 9/11 style commissions that are race-based. We'll allow organizations to work with the government to censor people based on misinformation for their political ideology or because of their skin color. We'll allow the schools to go ahead and say all people of a certain skin color are racist.
You're talking to people who aren't here at the panel, though.
No,
Please, I'm only addressing things you're
What does
saying.
this matter?
No, this is a
This
reply to
another
me.
pet peeve. Right.
I would agree with a lot of what you're saying, though. You're arguing you're arguing against a target that's not here. When we say I'm pretty anti-censorship.
I got in on this. I got in on this, and he's rebuttaling me. Like, let's be real though.
This is real quick, and then I'll leave Tiberius respond. Like, this is something that's a huge pet peeve of mine. So, well, okay, you're not here, or you're here, and Joe Biden isn't. So I shouldn't be able to talk about the policies of Joe Biden. That's your argument. Well, I disagree with Joe
if
Biden.
I
So
bring
what's
something up, which I brought up a lot,
Here's what we should do. We should all focus on what us, who have a very limited reach, what we think, as opposed to the way things are actually playing out by the people in positions of power. And you might say, well, I disagree with a lot of that. Great. Then your focus should be on that because it's some of the most nefarious shit that we've ever seen in this country. Intentionally dividing us.
What do you
based
think I
on
do
race.
when I go on leftist panels? What do you think I do when I go in those spaces? But we're not in those spaces.
Well, maybe
we're in
you
this
do.
space.
But the problem is that we're talking about those spaces and we're talking about, like, I can go back and reread the question, right? The idea, am I supposed to ignore the original question because you're like, oh, we all agree?
Of course not.
That's where my attention's being focused. And right now, we can see that there is a movement on the left that until the right starts to fight back, including by speaking the truth and not saying, well, we're not going to speak the truth because we think that we're losers to play the game. The left, and in particular, not even the left, the establishment laughs at that because they say, great, then we're going to keep teaching your children and indoctrinating them how shitty one certain skin color is. That's what's going to happen.
All right, so I'll rebuttal with this because there's a level where I think you're right. We got to play the game at least to some degree because it's the fucking dynamic of the big thing is at least for me is like, hey, look, it would be going like, look, all right, this is what our issues are. We're not fixated on the race thing, and that's the big thing that we need to do is that, like, a lot of it's just bait. It's just fucking bait, and we need to have the maturity just not to engage with some of it. Now, the other thing here is that we need to actually be able to prove on our efforts that, hey, look, if we are the right wing, the Conservative Party, the Republicans, what have you, is that we need to be able to, like, all right, cool, we're a bunch of racists, cool, great. Between 2016 and 2020, under the ultimate racist that you claim is Donald Trump, we did pick up 9 points with Hispanic voters. So you know what? Cool. Tell our voters that. Tell the people that we converted over to our side of the aisle that we're a bunch of racists, We do need to fight back to some degree, but we've got to do it in the right way. Just openly picking up the bait storm here only feeds these bastards. So That's my
Well,
contention.
I don't, and I'll say this real quick.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that. That's why
Yeah.
I didn't do the other panel, right?
Mhm.
Because I was told by people that were going to be involved that it was just race baiting bullshit. That's why you don't see. I just will. I'm like, if someone's calling me a racist, shit, I'm like, go fuck yourself. I'm not a racist. I'm not engaging with this. That's exactly why I'm directing my criticism more to people in positions of power, because I really don't give a shit that some left wing streamer is going to be like, you can't handle strong black people. Fuck you. You're a liar. Moving on. But when we're talking about, like, you know, what the policies that are actually being instituted, and people just believe this shit because it comes from a position of authority. White supremacy is the biggest terror. Like, how many, according to the studies that are cited by the FBI, you know how many people have died because of white supremacist terror attacks in this country in the past 30 years? 34. 34. Like, that's the biggest threat to this country. That's what we're going to talk about, and it's being blown so far, and it's causing division. Now, I don't want to focus on this shit. I think that it's insane that, like, when I argue, I'm going to be doing a panel with these white supremacists. You know what one of my fundamental arguments is? The fact that you want to judge people monolithically based on race as opposed to individuals is exactly antithetical to everything conservatism stands for in the first place. So if you're a white supremacist and you're claiming to be a conservative, you're full of shit, because the entire idea is to judge people as individuals. That's the point. So I don't give a shit what someone's IQ is based on their gender or their race. I care about the person in front of me. But if we're going to use bullshit data to say this one group's really evil and it happens to be white people or it happens to be conservatives, we have to be willing to say, if the data shows that that's bullshit, to call it out and say that's bullshit. And I'm not saying that we judge liberals or we judge people of certain skin colors like garbage based on the actual factual data, but it's worth pointing out that you're full of shit, that you're spreading lies. I'm not saying anyone on this panel,
right.
I'm saying the people.
So yeah, just to address this real quick, and then I'll pass it back off to Wig, is that the way that a lot of people, not only our politicians, but on the average on the right, that I firmly disagree with, is that they'll go on a massive tirade. It's like, look, you did this, you did this, you did this. You had it in the first 30 seconds. It's like, look, you know, you guys are focused on white nationalism. That's a big thing for you guys. Well, guess what? 34 people in 30 years, almost one a year. We can tell you this is a non-issue. Fuck off. We're going to focus on this. You literally post it up, you hard counter it, you re-fucking direct, and you don't feed this shit. And that's my policy on this kind of thing, is that we focus way too much on giving gas to their narrative. I think I'm done with this part of the conversation now. I think I made my point.
Okay, so
Wick
I'll
or
just,
Biggs or Spartacus, go ahead.
yeah, I'll just real quick speak on this. Just because the death toll is low currently does not mean that this is a problem we can ignore. And I'm not saying you're saying that we should ignore this problem, but I do think, and from the things that I've heard you say on this panel, I think you are overblowing the left's reaction to this. There are many people on the left that do not agree with this, that push back against it. There are many people in institutions of power that do this. In fact, in the New York City mayoral race, a very moderate Democrat just won that. The nomination, I think. I'm not sure if he won the nomination or the race itself, but he pushes back against stuff like this as well. It's only the online, terminally online spaces that you see all this kind of noise. And I would 100% agree with you that all it is noise. Anyone who's saying that they can know just by the color of your skin what you think or who you are is racist. Full stop. We all agree with that, I think, at least. But again, we cannot use the overreactions on one side to cover up the crimes that are happening on, and I don't even want to say the other side, because I would agree with you that white extremism isn't conservative. I think the connection there, I don't think it can be made. I think that it's a different thing entirely, but it exists. We need to be aware of it. It's a threat. We need to focus on it, not to the exclusion of everything else, but we cannot use the excesses of one side to cover up the crimes and the danger of another. We just cannot do that. That's what's happening on the left here. That's what the left is doing. They're trying to use the excesses of one side to cover up their own failings. And I'm sounding the alarm when I can. But again, I hate to sound both sides or whataboutism here, but we cannot do that. If you hate it when it happens to you, don't turn around and do it to the other group.
Okay, so Wick, I completely despise white supremacists.
Good.
I think that if you're going to say you're superior to everyone else because of your race, then you're either a shit person, you have a shit ideology. But with that being said, we can't talk about white supremacy being the biggest threat to our nation. When over the summer, there was plenty of people who had black supremacy ideas. You're acting like these don't exist when you say that we need to focus on white supremacy.
I have never said that doesn't exist. It is a problem. I'm saying it right now.
You just said we need to focus on white supremacy.
So we're clear. Black supremacy, as Martin Luther King Jr. said, black supremacy is just as dangerous as white supremacy. This is a thing. It exists. It's a problem, and we need to be aware of that as well. I'm saying that right now so we can be very clear, so I never get mischaracterized here again, that yes, there is extremism on the far left. It's an issue. It needs to be addressed.
Okay, I'll just say this real quick, and then I want to hear from Biggs. I fundamentally reject the idea that you think it's just a few extreme people on the left that are saying this. I could go through policy after policy from the current left-wing administration in power, through the academic institutions that are in power that are on the left today, from the media that's in power, from the entertainment industries, from the social media companies, all down the line, that in the name of fighting white supremacy or fighting the evils of whiteness or conservative are doing all sorts of things. We have voter ID is racist. All cops are bastards. So we need to defund the police. We have 9/11 style commissions need to go. We have January 6th was white supremacists. We have QAnon as white supremacists. We have the Proud Boys are white supremacists. We have, the idea that white supremacists and racism.
Do you not think the Proud Boys are white supremacists?
Are they? Show me the proof. Enrique Tarrio, the leader of them, isn't white. I've never heard.
What would be required to show you, to prove to you? What data would you need? If you tell me the data,
I think you're missing the forest of the trees here, Wick.
Right. Regardless, we can have this conversation. The problem is everything's white supremacy, and there's actual policies. Hell, climate change is white supremacy. The Green New Deal talks more about race than it does climate change. Right. And so the idea that it's like you're making it sound like, sure, 3 or 4 crazy people on Twitch are out there saying this shit. That's not the case. It is the people that are currently in positions of power. I argue all the time that the people that push back against this the most articulately and the most effective are actually people on the left. Like, if you look at people like Matt Taibbi and Glenn Greenwald and Michael Tracy that talked about all of this shit that went on with, like, the riots or with the push against conservatives and
Rob's actually been, he's gone off on his diatribes, but
more
he's
so than
been
many
pretty
people
reserved
on the right.
for the most
They've
part.
been very articulate
and
good on it. And despite the fact that they hate Donald Trump, they're not Republican and things like that. But it is a misnomer, and it is just flat out wrong to claim that this is just the idea of a few fringe people. Certainly it's not everyone on the left, but the people in positions of power on the left currently are embracing this idea. They're trying to teach it to children. They're enacting policies that are a threat to our Bill of Rights protections, and they're doing all sorts of heinous shit in the name of fighting white supremacy that's being blown massively out of proportion.
The original question, and again, I see Tiberius, his mind is melting, and so I just have to push back against this, and I'll stop. I promise. But the original question was again, are all white people and all conservatives being painted as white supremacists, and is that bad? And I would say unequivocally yes. But it's ironic to see you doing the same thing.
It's fine.
In reverse. It's weird. We all agree that the first premise here is bad. This is also bad, and I would agree with you that it's not just a few online lefties and stuff like that, that there are policies that we need to fight against. Getting rid of the filibuster, for example, I think is the dumbest dumb I've ever heard dumbed by the left.
Dumb I ever
stupidest idea that anyone's ever come up with, and I really push back against that hard. And other policies that you can see and we could talk about. But just to drop this, I think that we need to stop generalizing groups as a whole. We can't look and say the left is crazy or the right is crazy. It doesn't help. It doesn't. This conversation is going nowhere. The first topic
Biggs,
was so great.
I promise, Biggs. I'll do
Tiberius,
this.
Do you have something?
It is absurd.
I was going to say Tiberius said something, so you can go before me.
Okay. Yeah. It is I just want to say real quick, it is absurd to say by pointing out the specific policies of the party in power right now that it's the same as me saying all white people are racist. So fucking stupid.
Okay, so the one thing I want to get on here, right, is that we got into the nuance of like, all right, cool. This thing was white nationalist. This thing was white nationalist. This thing was white nationalist. And I'm like, all right, maybe some of this is true, some is not. But like, what triggers the fuck out of me that my fellow righties do is like, all right, well, the Proud Boys aren't racist, or whatever. I'm like, okay, regardless if they are or not, because why are we trying to defend the Proud Boys? Are they worth defending? Are they really our friends? Are these people that we want in our coalition and onboarded? I've met a lot of Proud Boys. I'm not really fans of these motherfuckers. Can we offboard these pieces of shit? Do we have to defend them? Please stop.
To do with defending them, to say, like, for example, if someone's like,
no. Like, if somebody,
real quick, let's
Go
say CPAC happens and they're like, oh, this new up and coming streamer Tiberius, we don't think he's good as a conservative. We'll fucking call him white supremacist then. And when I'd say,
Fuck him.
I might not agree with all of
Fuck him.
Tiberius,
Just fuck Tiberius.
but I don't think he's white supremacist. You would be there saying, no, Rob, don't defend me. If you don't like my opinions, then go ahead and say that I'm a white supremacist. It's bullshit.
Yep.
Right. So here's my thing, and maybe you can accuse me of throwing out the baby with the bathwater on this one, but this is a group that I care for. This is a group that I don't agree with on like anything. And even if they're not white supremacists, they've got such horrible ideologies that I don't even want to be associated defending them and being like, oh well, they're not white supremacists. For all I'm concerned is that if the left wants to throw the Proud Boys under the water, I'm just like, cool, they're not part of our coalition. Fuck those people. I don't like them anyway.
But
So,
here's the issue with that. And if someone were to come and attack a left person
always got a
that I
fucking
disagree
harsh
with,
my
but knew
fucking
that they
vibe.
knew that they weren't what they were accused of being, I would defend them even if I disagree with their policies. And the idea that you just espoused, that if people are wanting to go after the Proud Boys, then fuck them. They're not part of this coalition anyways. It goes back to what I've said before about the freedom of speech, that they went for the far right and I wasn't far right, so I didn't care. Then they came after the right and I wasn't right, so I didn't care. Then they came after the center and I wasn't center, so I didn't care. No, it falls under that. I mean, whether you want to believe that or not,
Zach, why you gotta do that shit?
You're not a Proud Boy and you don't agree with what they're saying, so you don't care. So I mean, it's just funny. It's just funny to watch someone
again. It's not just that they say stupid shit. It's the Proud Boys engage in stupid shit. They are a harmful organization. Why are we defending them? Why can't you just say, hey, it's not okay to be a Proud Boy. The Proud Boys do some heinous shit. We should probably be against that. What's wrong with that?
Everybody does heinous shit. Fucking Antifa does heinous shit.
Yeah.
Can I rebut?
Sure.
Sprout?
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Tiberius. I didn't mean to blow your mind again, but
no, you're cool. So I get where you're going, right, man? Because there's a level where like,
yeah,
hey, look,
fucking Barry all went downhill after that. After Barry left, it was fucking shit show.
You might have a point here, right? The other side of that is that I don't operate that way. Like I've got a way where like my glass is empty. And then you've got to fill that up with respect. So whether you're a person, an institution, a group of people, is that I'm not going to give you credit immediately for just existing or for doing certain things. You've got to earn that, right? You've got to do good deeds. You got to do that kind of shit. And so if somebody comes onto one of my fellow right wingers, and I think the guy's a piece of shit, and they start trashing him, calling him all these things, you know what? Yeah, I'm not going to just defend him off the top of the bat. Same for a left winger. Usually I'm a little bit more biased because I don't like left wingers in general. But, when it comes to this, I'm not picking up the sword to defend every single person that gets attacked from the left and vice versa for the right. Is that I just don't operate that way because there's some people that I just don't feel like are worth fucking defending. And so I hope you can at least appreciate where I'm coming from.
But what if this wasn't the Proud Boys? What if this is someone you were completely wrong about that you decided not to defend, and turns out you thought completely wrong about this group or this individual because you didn't get to have a deep enough conversation with them to understand who they truly are. So like, what if you're 100% wrong about these guys and you just let them drown? You just let them get hit and let them get hit over and over and over again because you just don't care because you don't like this individual. But you were wrong about them the entire time for the reason you didn't like them, but never cared enough to address that.
Anyone advocating for violence against even neo-Nazis is not on my team. Anyone advocating to punch people in the face is not on my team.
So the thing, I don't know that there's been anyone, at least I can't say that. I have been quite forceful. All political violence is wrong for a long time. I was one of the first people I know that did a video. My son due date was January 6th. I was nervous as shit. I remember going to pick up groceries. 5 minutes before I get in my car to pick up groceries, the first reports of people clashing with police at the Capitol happened. I got them. You can go to my YouTube page, see my video on January 6th. I was like, this is fucked up. Political violence is wrong. I feel the same about the Proud Boys. If the Proud Boys are showing up to start shit in political violence, it's wrong. Period. End of story. Now, if they're defending, if they get attacked and they defend themselves, that's different. But the same's true of Black Lives Matter. If Black Lives Matter is not doing anything and a Proud Boy punches them in the face, absolutely they have the right to defend themselves. But I think the entire thing is childish and dangerous to be seeking political violence for the sake of it. It's stupid. As far as everything else the Proud Boys stand for, I don't know. I haven't looked into them much. This is irrelevant to the constant charge of, well, that's racist. So far, QAnon's racist, and the Proud Boys are racist. John Brennan, former head of the CIA, said, here's the groups we need to go after: the racist white supremacists, the nationalists, and the libertarians. They're racist too. Fuck it. Why not? Says the former head of the CIA. This charge is absurd. And as long as we say, well, if I don't really like that person, then I'll just go along with their racist, that's bullshit. Like, if you have a legitimate reason to not like someone, fine. Me saying I would like proof that they're racist before I just accept that they're racist isn't the same as me defending them. Like, I don't give it. I don't, like, for example, if I say I think what happened to George Floyd was heinous, like, that's not me defending that he stuck a gun to a pregnant woman's stomach. He sounds like he was a piece of shit, but I'm not defending him as a person. If I say, wait a minute, in this specific incident, it's the same here. If you're going to make charges that this certain groups of white supremacists, this is one of the major problems we have in this country. And we've all, I don't know about you, Wick, I'm assuming you probably have dealt with this. I've dealt with it a lot. I guess I won't speak for other people. I get dismissed based on the argument that, well, I'm clearly a white supremacist. Clearly,
I have been called fascist because I do not support 100% of what the left does. It's silly when it happens. It's ridiculous when it happens. In fact, I've been called disgusting because I have conservative friends. If you want to go after people saying that kind of rhetoric, let's walk hand in hand. Let's go, buddy. We got this together. But you're doing this weird thing, like, where you'll say, I think what happens to George Floyd is heinous. And then you'll go on about all the sins he committed, pointing a gun to a pregnant woman's stomach and things like that. Why do we need to say that? Why do we need to bring this up? Why is that important?
Because he's being idolized. They're making statues of him. People on the left are idolizing this person that isn't meant to be idolized.
He's a martyr. He's a martyr.
The point, look, I'm not saying that shit. The reason I bring that up is because I push back against people on the right that say that, right? They'll say, well, George Floyd was a shitty person. I'm just using that as the example to say that's irrelevant. Did the police deserve to treat him like that? And that I don't give a shit if he was the most heinous criminal ever. He was on the street that day, and did the cops engage in a way that wasn't allowed or that was immoral or grotesque? Yes, they did. Right? That has not, his past has, that's my entire point. It's the same as you might hate the Proud Boys for a billion reasons. That doesn't mean they're white supremacists. And the idea, when I'm pushing back, is Tiberius's argument of, if I don't like these people, I'm not going to defend them. I don't even look at it as defending them. I look at it as, I'm tired of the conversation being shut down by saying, oh, X group is racist or X person is racist. That's bullshit. I no longer accept it. They may very well be racist, as may be QAnon. I don't know. But when people just
going off the deep end,
therefore we dismiss them. Because then look at what happens. Look at the end result of this. Then we end up in a real situation with real people in positions of power, not just people on Twitch and YouTube that say shit like this. Well, actually, when Black Lives Matter is out there committing all of this violence, that's actually a civil rights movement. And property destruction, that's not the same as violence. Like the guy that just testified, the Capitol City cop or the Capitol police officer that just testified yesterday in the January 6 hearings, that was crying, talking about how devastated he was by the riots of January 6. But he publicly tweeted out and mocked Trump when on May 31st in 2020, a mob tried to storm the White House and had to send Trump to a bunker. And he also publicly put tweets out about how property destruction is a legitimate response to murder in the case of George Floyd. That's the shit we end up seeing. And when you say, I'm trying to warn people, I'm trying to stop this shit.
We've gone so far off the rails with this, it's ridiculous.
By doing this, by encouraging or ignoring violence from one side, it'll cause violence from the other side to be inevitable. Because a bunch of extremists on the right are going to say, oh, well, if the other side could do it, so can we.
But we just talked about personal responsibility, right?
Sure,
just
that's
because,
true.
It's happening. Like the January 6th thing, the issue wasn't just the property destruction. All they had done is just broken some windows, whatever. That's not all they did. They assaulted police officers. They assaulted a lot of people. We saw a video of that. It was an issue. It should not be defended.
Show us 223 examples of the left that we
Oh
in
my-
locations of the left
I'm
that
not
we saw over and over.
defending that.
Okay, the point that I'm trying to make is because we attach labels like white supremacy or racist to shit, the people in institutions of power are able to overlook one and put undue focus on the other. Right? So, for example, was January 6th a white supremacist
Rob wants to do
insurrection?
one-on-one. Yeah, maybe.
I don't think it was a white supremacist insurrection, but it was an insurrection.
And yet that's what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Chris Wray and what's the general's name? That's what they called it. It was white rage, white anger.
White rage.
You don't see where that leads?
Look, I have problems with issues of how we talk about these things. I understand that, but that is a small problem compared to what happened on January 6th. Now, I understand this is a more pernicious one because it's pervasive, it's infiltrated our way of speaking and our dialect and our way of talking. I've had panels and I've talked about how using terms like white privilege and whiteness, we probably shouldn't do that outside of an academic setting. It doesn't have a function really. It's not helpful. I could get behind that, but again, I'm feeling you're using these things, which are problems, to minimize the actions
I don't know what the fuck they're
taken
arguing about
by
anymore.
other groups and by the more conservative side of things, not just
Okay.
violent actions.
How am I
That's what we
minimizing?
talk about.
Like, if you want after the show, I'll show you the video that I put January 6th. I can show you of
Okay,
weeks
I
of
can look that
discussions
up.
I
I did
had
not.
with people, right? Where people
Okay.
were saying the tree of liberty needs to be refreshed with the
I
blood of
did
tyrants.
not
and me saying,
mean,
you
and I'm
fucking idiot.
apologizing if I have mischaracterized
Mm.
your take on this. I apologize 100%. If I
Mischaracterization.
I think that we're looking at two fundamental things. Certainly, anytime a heinous action is taken, we should be able to call out that action. We shouldn't. My point when I was bringing this up was pushing back against Tiberius is to say, I don't agree with the people that engaged in violence January 6th. I've said from the get-go, there's two different groups of people. There's the people that were in the Capitol that were being peaceful. They deserve the same punishment as the people that were in the Capitol during Kavanaugh got. A small fine for trespassing and then be sent on their way. That's not the treatment they're getting. However,
Yeah,
the
pretty
people that
much.
engaged in violence with the police
It's fine.
deserve to be punished in a serious way. It's across the board. I don't give a shit if you're doing it in the name of Black Lives Matter or you're doing it in the name of you thought
At least
the
Rob's pretty
election was stolen.
consistent.
It doesn't
I like
matter.
that he at
That
least
sort
is
of violence
consistent
should be punished in the same way.
views
The
about
problem is we could see the
you
people
do
in
this, you
positions
get
of
this
power
punishment
using the
thing for
ideology
both
of
parties,
conservatism being bad
both sides of
and
the aisle.
white people and white supremacy being so bad. We could see that proportionally the problem was far, far, far worse on the left. And when it comes to the reaction from the people in positions of power, it was far, 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 far harsher to people on the right. And they get away with that based on this sort of, well, anything that we dislike is white supremacy. If we could throw those trigger words out, it's red meat. People will be like, oh shit, racist, white supremacists, the Klan, yeah, fuck them. We don't like them. Do what you throw the book at them. Take away their Fourth Amendment rights. Put them in solitary confinement. We don't give a shit. Did you see that guy with the Chewbacca horns? Man, that guy, white supremacist? Shit, throw away the key, man. Like, that's what ends up happening. And when you say, well, the bad things that happened January, sure, there were bad things that happened January 6th. The only person that died was killed by a police officer killing a Trump supporter. But we can see individual examples from the left where we saw that sort of death. And it's not whataboutism. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is each of these events is heinous. But why is it the people in positions of power have hyper-focused on just one? Just one. And all the other shit, it's like, that really wasn't a big deal. And I think that one of the major problems of that, and we're going to see, just like let me put it to you this way. Like, if someone on the left, this might make more sense. Was 9/11 a big deal? Abso-fucking-lutely. It was a huge deal. One of the biggest events probably that I'll ever witness in my life for this country. Did that justify the Patriot Act? Did it justify saying all Muslims, the people that were saying that shit, predominantly on the right, all Muslims, I don't trust any Muslims. No, it was worth saying that shit's still repugnant.
As soon as the people in power try to do similar things, again, I think you're conflating some things. Now, there are some worrying bills that are on the floor. There are some worrying bills that have been brought up. There are some worrying solutions that have been proposed. I will agree with you on that. But by and large, the onus of this, I would disagree 100% that the onus of this is in groups like Black Lives Matter and things like that. I do not think that they engage on these things to the same level. There are more of them, so it may look more. I would agree with that. But when it comes down to the per capita thing, that by and large, you see this happen more often in groups like the Proud Boys. And I'm not even saying conservatives here. I'm not even saying conservatives. Conservatives are free and clear for the most part on the
Free
violence issue.
and clear.
It's when we get down
Love
into
it.
these extremist groups that there is a huge issue, and it's a seed that's being planted that we have seen growing. Now, again, I think overall racism, to
shit.
get back
Whoops.
to the initial question, racism and things is on the decline. We could look at
He's giving
anti-Semitism
Tiberius
specifically.
close
That
up.
is lower in America and North America than in Europe and in Western Europe. And in Eastern and Western Europe, they have hate crime laws, and they have all these anti-Semitism laws and things like that. But still, it hasn't solved the problems over there, and we need to keep that in mind when we propose things like hate crimes and hate
So,
speech laws and things like that. I
so
would not be
Wick,
okay with those.
so Wick, I've got a couple of questions for you.
Of
So if
course,
I could
let's
ask
hear it.
them. So have you done any studying into the 3%ers?
A little
Oh
bit, but
shit.
again, I don't have the data all,
Oh
I don't have it at
shit.
my fingertips
What's
here to
Zach
drop.
doing? Don't do
So
it, Zach.
So would you be willing to say that 3%ers are white supremacists, or would you be willing to give an opinion
Huh?
on whether or not the 3%ers are white supremacist?
no, I don't have enough information on them to say either way. I mean, it would be irresponsible for me to claim one way or the other on this. I just don't know enough about them.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you said that you don't have enough information to say so, because a lot of people will just hear 3%ers and go with the media narrative and say that they're it's a white supremacist
Again,
organization.
I try
Um,
not to talk out of my ass. If I don't know, there's no problem with me saying I don't know. Yeah.
I just think it's an issue, right? I think it's an issue, like when the right creates a group, such as the 3%ers, where the whole idea of the group is that if the government becomes tyrannical, we'll be the group that continues to fight for your rights, just like
He
the
just wants to
colonialists did
be
against the British,
the
for it to
superhero.
be immediately called a white supremacist
Want to
group,
be the
only because of the fact that
superhero.
it's on the right. There's no one's been able to show me evidence that the 3%ers are white supremacists, besides the fact that they're on the right, and then that a few outliers have done a few things. I think it was like 4 or 5 events since 2016, and that these were individuals, not even the whole group, that claimed they were part of the 3%ers. So I think it's irresponsible by the media to continue to label groups where it's mainly conservatives as white supremacists without having any kind of facts behind them, without having any kind of anything behind the statements, besides the fact that they're on the right, and the left will eat this shit up and continue to call the 3%ers white supremacists. They continue to do this, when that's not exactly the truth of the case, and it only pushes more animosity towards the right. It only pushes more animosity towards white people in general, with the idea of white supremacists. I think earlier in the summer, when BLM was doing their things, they encouraged white people to get on their knees, beg them for forgiveness, for what their great grandfathers did. Even if that, you can go further back if you want to, but that's ridiculous. Like to have someone get on their knees and beg them for forgiveness.
I would agree with
This is
that.
what
That is
we see
ridiculous.
though. This is what we see though. This is what we see when we talk with white people, when they talk, at least white conservatives, when they talk to people on Twitch, is that they're supposed to have this quote unquote white guilt as to what happened to their great etc. and
I
so on.
wish, Sproutacus, that I could say that
Great,
never
great,
happens, but
etc. and
unfortunately
so
it does.
on.
I will have to agree with you that there are certain people.
Great,
But by and large,
etc.
even
and so
online,
on.
even in Twitch
I
spaces,
love it.
even with people I would vehemently disagree with, I will have to give credit where credit is due. I have never been told that I should feel guilty. Well, I won't say never. 99.999% of people have never told me that I should feel guilty for being white. That I should feel. In fact, people have pushed back against that when the very few people who do bring that up, it gets torn down in lefty spaces. It gets made fun of. It gets mocked, as it should be. I am agreeing with you that that kind of thing is ridiculous. It's harmful. Things like the privilege walk are bad and should be pushed back against, but we are overblowing the amount of times these things are happening.
Okay, but do you
There's
do you
plenty
not
of
think?
evidence of it being. What I want to do is though, I'm going to shut my mouth. I want to give Biggs and Tiberius a chance to talk, and then we'll do closing statements for everyone. And people can stick around if they want, but I don't want to keep people here hours past. So let's leave Biggs go first, then Tiberius, and then we'll do closing statements.
Yeah, I can do my closing statement now too. So what I think personally is what this all comes down to is tribalism. I think that people have lost all sense of like rational personal thought. Everybody wants to be part of a team. Everybody wants to be able to blame the other side for any misfortunes or failings, and they don't want to take any responsibility for their own team. I think this is just a lot of ridiculousness on both sides. When it comes to the issue of like labeling like white people as being Republican or racist or whatever that might be, I think that's pretty ridiculous. I think we've all shown here just by talking is the majority of the outspoken left especially tends to be white liberals. So I just think that a whole premise is kind of ridiculous. I think we need to, as a country, try to come together and make actual rational thoughts, not focusing on our ideological differences, and being able to come to your own critical thinking and find a solution, and then we can kind of push for that. I think if we do that and try to avoid this partisan dichotomy, I think we can actually make real change in this country. I think a lot of times, and I've said this on many panels, I think a lot of the things that we want from both the left and the right are the same thing. So I think that when it comes to that, I think we just have different ways of maybe coming about it. But I think if we can kind of put those differences aside and make real rational solutions come to light, I think we can really make a difference in this country. So
Tiberius, you don't have to give a closing statement now if you don't want, but you can.
I have a feeling you're gonna. I have a feeling you're gonna want to fire back at me because I didn't get the chance to rebuttal earlier. Is that I don't get me wrong. I understand where you and Sprout are coming from, but look, two things that I want to say here. Number one, I am a firm believer in that he who defends everything defends nothing. We have to pick and choose our battles because you know what? I'm a right winger and I want to fucking
over
win.
this panel now.
On the other side of that conversation, is that when it comes to like, hey, look, like great example, the dude with the horns who went into the Capitol. The left's going to blame him for this. They're going to accuse him of that. They're going to accuse him of that. I don't care what they accuse him of because, quite honestly, I think he's a traitor. And I'm not even going to get into that particular conversation because I know I disagree with like half the right on that fucking thing.
Who are you?
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
I'm sorry.
The dude with the bull horns who went into the fucking yeah. Anyway, so at least where I am with this is like, look, the left can blame who whatever.
I'm sure you're talking trash about me behind my back. It's okay.
That because this is my biggest problem with the fucking left in general is they want to die on every stupid little goddamn hill they can find, and it's why they're ineffectual as shit. If they actually focused on issues at all, they'd whip our ass on a number of them. And I'm very glad that they're so ineffectual on this one. But the problem that I'm seeing is that the right is picking up this fucking bad habit, and we need to stop trying to defend people that really aren't defensible and start going after some of these issues that we know that we can really hit on.
Okay, I can do closing statement first if people don't mind, and then we'll just go around the horn.
Sure.
So yeah, just to answer that real quick, I would just say this: pushing back against unsubstantiated charges of racism, even against people you don't like, isn't tantamount to defending that person. And as long one of the largest and most effective charges that the left has is just screaming racism, and then people being unwilling to listen to the person that's accused and just assuming that they would be a pariah if they defended from that accusation or questioned that accusation of racism. Until we on the right start pushing back against this shit, saying no, just because we don't like someone doesn't mean that they're necessarily a racist. Because if we allow that charge to be levied against whoever, the bullhorn guy, for example, I don't know if people have called him racist, but if we allow that, then we can see the real world implications of how people run with that, and they'll be able to use that on other people whenever they feel like. So I just completely disagree. I think that it is worth pointing out when these accusations of racism are just thrown around, and that we need to start going on the offense, because as it is right now, if we're unwilling to call that out, they're going to keep doing it. We're going to see it not just on panels where people are saying, can we even have a white issues panel, or would that be racist, or would it be neo-Nazis and shit like that? But also in the halls of government. I thought that particularly the first topic on this, I thought was a really good topic. I would like to have more conversations about issues like that, but the questions were what the questions were. And I think that ultimately I'm tired of these accusations of racism. I'm tired of it. respect
definitely
everyone
agree.
on this panel. I don't think anyone's been bad in this panel, but I do fundamentally disagree with Wick's opinion that this is just a fringe thing. It's not. We could see that there are people in positions of leadership in our government, in our major institutions that weaponize these accusations of racism, that are dividing these country based on these accusations of racism. We could see that, and we didn't even get into this, but we could see that all polling shows that once this started to happen more and more, particularly around 2013, that both whites and black people polled in this country think that race relations are deteriorating at a rapid pace. The more we focus on this, even Wick agrees, actual racism is kind of decreasing. But the more we talk about it, the more we allow this agenda to divide us, the more it actually causes more hatred and more distrust of people based on race. And it's absolutely absurd. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't push back logically with data. I agree with Tiberius. A lot of the answer is just saying, F you, we're not playing your game. We don't give a shit. You have nothing to add. That's why you're saying this. But sadly, you can't always say that. You know how many times I get put on panels with people where it's like, I didn't know that they were going to say this crazy shit about me. And so, I end up having to push back. It happens. And certainly it happens when people in positions of power are saying this. We can't just ignore it. So, yeah, I thought it was a good issue. And I think that to tie a bow on this, I think that this issue does play into the first issue. I think there are a lot of people that are afraid to speak up because they think talking about white issues will get them labeled as a racist, just like we see with the men's right movement. There are men-specific issues that are worth talking about, but so many people are afraid to speak up because they feel that it's shameful, that they'll be embarrassed, that people will make fun of them. So I'm proud to fight back against this garbage of calling everything racist and things like that. I will continue to do so, but I've been really happy to be on this panel with everyone and the differing beliefs on it. So, Sproticus, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll go next. I want to start off with some clarification. I say this for closing statements for a reason. I want to clarify because I was absolutely ran over when I said it about the COVID vaccine. It's what I was trying to get across
Oh my
was
God,
therapeutic
always
for the
going
Delta
back to
variant,
that.
which accounts for 70 to 80%, 86% of the cases in the United States right
Back.
now. But that's just a
No.
clarification to a prior statement I made.
No, don't do it.
On that, move on to the topic. And the topic, I think that, like I said before, to see someone's white and to label them as anything is inherently racist on its face. That's where I'll leave the first question. The second question, no one's really been able to change my mind that racism has gone down in America. It's just the issue that we've given prominence to people's voices who are racist. We've given these people the idea that their racist thoughts matter by retweeting, by going after on Twitter, by sharing, by having news media cover this kind of stuff. If we left them in obscurity, we'd be a completely different America now. And that's what we really need to do. We need to leave these racist ideas in obscurity. And when someone does call someone racist who isn't racist, we need to inherently defend that. We need to make sure that people who aren't racist aren't being called racist. Because if we just let anyone to be called racist, then first off, there's going to grow the animosity against that certain group, and second off, racist isn't going to mean anything anymore. Because if you just call anyone racist that you disagree with, the word racist is going to lose its value, which I think it already has. Because now people are called racist, it's not taken as harshly as it may have 5 years ago, which is a huge thing. I think that definitely needs to be talked about is the difference in how harshly racism is taken now and 5 years ago. Because of the overuse, the constantly calling anyone you disagree with, anyone the left disagrees with, as racist.
Talking so long, he's getting indigestion.
I think that's something that needs to be
That's how
done
long
and
he's
over
talking.
with, because it's making this seem
You
like
can't
it's
even
not
talk
an
without
issue
burping
when it
or
is an
getting
issue in
indigestion.
certain scenarios, and it needs to be reserved to actually when there is a problem, not just when you disagree with somebody. And that's really my closing statement.
Okay.
Biggs, if you wanted to get,
Yeah.
go ahead, Wick, please.
Oh no, Biggs.
Wick,
Biggs can go.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
first and foremost, I just want to thank I am Sproticus, Tiberius D, Wick, and Rob Noerr. Thank you all, especially Rob for kind of hosting, being the impromptu host for this panel. I know you weren't expecting that, but I appreciate it. All these gentlemen are definitely worthy of a follow and a subscription. So everybody on here, shout out to all of them. Thank you guys for having this. Again, I'm at Biggs8500 at Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. And as far as the topic goes, like I said, I just want people to come together and have conversations like this. I think anytime we can kind of put party party lines aside and try to focus on like actual solutions is always a good, meaningful conversation. And I think we need to strive for more of that in the Twitch sphere, especially. I think we have a lot of rhetoric and a lot of animosity from the right and left. So I think we can bring people together through these panels. I think that's a step in the right direction. So thank you all. Thank you all for the viewers. I really appreciate all of you. And shout out to everybody here. I think you guys did an amazing job. I think based on the so-called controversy of these panels, the one that Wick and I were on last week, and then this one today, I think both of them went a lot better than what I expected. And I think everybody had a lot of interesting things to add. So thank you all, and thanks for all the viewers. You guys have a great night.
Thanks. Wick, go
Okay.
ahead, and then we'll leave Tiberius finish.
Fair enough. So, yeah, so I guess I'll just say this. Thank you for inviting me here. Thank you for letting me talk. I think even if you disagree and we have substantive disagreements on this, I don't think ill of you. I don't think you are trying to be malicious. I don't think you are, you're not doing it to like uh, further some agenda.
He's
I
doing
will
it for
say
the
that, and I
dunks, bro.
appreciate hearing different
Do
perspectives
it for the
because,
dunks.
again, I might be wrong. I don't think I am. Um, when it comes to race relations in America and the idea that we can judge someone and their worth by looking at the color of the skin, that's just not true. It's not factual. It's not backed up by data. It's racist on its face, and I can agree with everyone here on that. However, my main disagreement with the question at large comes in the value of the media and other sources highlighting incidents of racism. I think that racism is going down in this country precisely because we are, as a group, as a culture, becoming more and more aware of the things we are doing, the systemic issues, the implicit biases and explicit biases we may have, and how they're causing harm to different communities. I think there's value to that. I think that's a good thing. I think that we could all get behind that. I would love to have a discussion further and kind of get into this more into the weeds with these things with any of you lovely individuals. Especially that COVID comment, but that's another day.
Yeah.
Thank you again for having me. You can find me at twitch.tv/death of certainty, all one word, no spaces or anything like that. Yeah, and I'd love to talk to any of you again. Thank you.
Thanks. Tiberius?
All right. To wrap up my final thoughts when it comes to the platforming part, or like how we engage and who we defend. Sprout actually kind of hit my counterpoint a little bit there, and I'm just kind of surprised there. Is like, the term racist doesn't mean a lot to people anymore because it's used so ubiquitously. It's like Nazi for the right, or I'm sorry, it's like how the left has demeaned Nazi to the point of ridiculousness. It's how the right completely demeaned communist to the point of ridiculousness. Is that it's been thrown around to such a point it doesn't matter that much. And my rebuttal simply would have been that I think only dumbass leftists care about being called a racist at this point. Everyone else is just like, nah, this shit's stupid. Like, it just, that point, that kind of point. So at least for me, is that I think this is very easy to be like, hey, look, you know what? Let's focus on race again. You can pull the old Ronald Reagan. There you go again. We don't have to feed this machine. But as far as the original topic, I think when it comes down to these issues, I think that the right has pulled its punches on letting the left get away with some stupid shit. I absolutely agree with Rob in that regard. As far as is racism getting increased, I would say I don't think it's increased. I think what we've done to a large degree is we've opened up a lot of wounds. We realize that there's a lot of problems there, and we need to have a lot more communications, particularly I don't know how to say that. I'm sorry. There needs to be a bigger talk of people between their communities, because a great example here in my community is that it's 90% white or 95% white, something like that. A lot of people don't understand the struggles of other racial communities and how that goes. I don't know how to word this right in the PC way. I apologize. But anyway, what I'm getting at is like, there needs to be a level where we can communicate, and that communication isn't happening. We're falling in on partisan lines. We're falling in on political lines, and that's not good. And I hope that I've talked about many times on my channel is that the right can reach out to conservatives and the Black community and the Hispanic community. We can build out the ultimate alliance, and we can crush the fucking left the way that we should. And anyway, I'm going to end off with that. I've been Tiberius D. I hope you like what I have to say, and you can catch me out at twitch.tv/TiberiusD. I appreciate it.
Well, hey, thanks so much. Really, I appreciate all of you. I'm not the greatest moderator. I don't like moderating, so I
You
stumbled
did
through
great,
this.
man.
So
You did
just
amazing.
You did fine.
just a reminder to everyone, Samantha Banana actually put this together, and I do want to give a shout out to her. She did the legwork of getting the people together, and just because she had a problem with internet and stuff today, that's no problem. So she came up with the topics and did all the legwork, so special thanks to her, and I hope she gets a chance to watch this, and hopefully she enjoyed it and thought it was worthwhile, as I did think it was worthwhile. So I'll be sticking around streaming if people want to. Otherwise, thank you so much for spending your, what do we got tonight? My day's all run today. Wednesday night. You know, we're a bunch of nerds talking politics issues on a Wednesday night, but I have fun. I like doing it. So check out everyone's channel, and thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Talk to you guys later. Bye.
Peace.
Yep. Take it easy, Wick.